All right, I think we are live. So welcome everyone to another live stream here on the Maran Motoring channel. Hope you guys are all having a good weekend here so far. Thanks for joining me here on a Saturday. I know a little different than usual. This way we don't interfere with anyone's Mother's Day plans, and happy early Mother's Day to all the moms out there as well. But anyway, so like all the other live streams here, we're going to go for about 2 hours. I'm going to give priority answering to anyone who does a super chat or a super thanks thing. And also I always give priority answering to anyone who's a member of the channel with their little special badges there. But yeah, otherwise, I see we have a few people already have joined here. Double Strike Photo says, okay, I'm not missing 2 in a row. Well, I appreciate you joining. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Dom's here as well. Thanks, Dom. Truck and Car Guy, I see he's here. Thanks for joining as well. And Arctic Turn, Kevin Hawthorne. Ace of Spades says, greetings. I'll be watching while running a yard sale this morning. That's awesome. Good luck with the yard sale. Hopefully get some good sales there. It's always an interesting experience. And Charlie Boy, thanks for joining here as well. And Jazzbo, I see, says, good afternoon. Happy Mother's Day to Beth. Thank you. She appreciates that. It's going to be a nice day tomorrow. And I've been already celebrating a little bit with our parents and all that. Ted Adam Green says, hey, Matt, how's it going? Thanks for joining as well, Ted. And I appreciate all the comments, by the way, from all of you guys that are, commenting on all the videos all the time. It really, really is appreciated. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the videos this week. A little bit different, doing all truck stuff, but hopefully you guys still appreciated that. And got some more good stuff here, next week. So you have to stay tuned for all that. And Truck and Car Guy is just rejoined as a member himself there. So thanks for joining back in, Truck and Car Guy. And Dom's asking any plans for Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to Beth as well. It's very nice of you, Dom. So our plans are just going to be, just kind of lay low and relax because I will be doing a work trip here this week. And so, kind of just having a nice relaxing day at home here while I'm still home before my travels. So that's, going to be the main plans. May do a few little surprise things, and just have some fun. But yeah, should be a good day. And, let me see. Lucas says, I really want Toyota to bring a compact truck. Me too. I think it would be a money printer for them. And I think they're looking into it. So we'll see, what ends up coming out of that. Goth Rocker says, hey, Matt, how's it going? Going well. Hopefully you're doing well too. And Tu Chang is here. Thanks for joining, Tu. Says, hey, Matt. And all right. Well, yeah, glad we got a bunch of us joining in here. And so one thing, just to start us off before we have any other questions here, I don't know if you guys have been seeing the first drive reviews of the VinFast VF8, but it's been real entertaining to read those. Motor One did a hilarious article I tweeted out yesterday. It's so funny how bad the VF8 is. And I've likened it to the Yugo of our generation. I haven't driven it yet, but I think it's like they got a lot of problems to work out before those things are ever going to be seriously considered by anybody. And it's just kind of funny, usually cars these days are so polished and so well done. A lot of people say, oh, you're too positive in your reviews most of the time. And that's because like modern cars are really good for the most part. And it takes a lot to really screw up badly because the standards are just so high compared to what they were even 15 or 20 years ago. And so it's really hard to be like, wow, this car is terrible for some objective reason. And with the VinFast, though, it's like one of those rare cars these days where it's like, man, like this is actually a truly, half effort kind of car, at least so far. And it's kind of funny. But anyway, Truck and Car Guy, thank you so much for gifting 10 memberships there. And so see everyone snapping those up. Make sure you guys have your gifting on if you want to make sure you're eligible for those. But I think we got them all. I'll get to there. Thanks so much, Truck and Car Guy. You're the real VIP here in these live streams. So I guess I should say MVP, but both. You're also a VIP as well. But yeah, thanks so much for gifting those memberships to everyone and helping to grow that membership base there a little bit. And all right, so I see Adam also, thanks for joining. He says, yeah, they're bad. I predict VinFast won't last in the US. It's honestly shocking that they ever got as far as they got. Because I guess it's just from what I've heard, they just have an enormous amount of money, but I don't know who's bankrolling them and thinks this is promising. Like, there's other car companies that I think obviously are struggling as well. There's plenty of them like Lordstown Motors and stuff. There's some that, just aren't going to make the cut. But VinFast, I don't know who is so convinced that this is like a solid idea. They've just had so many bad ideas with how they were trying to like lease out the battery separate of the vehicle. And they're trying to like do all these unique things. And I guess I got to commend them for the bravery and the creativity, but like, it's just like really bad. Like if you're gonna, and also like whenever you put out a vehicle for reviewers to review, like you're gonna obsess over trying to be perfect, and you're gonna make sure that you're putting out your best, presentation, your best foot forward, and then, to put it out to people who are their job is to be critical of vehicles, and then have it have all these issues. I don't know what the rush is. I don't know if they're investors or just like, you need to have these cars out by spring of 2023 or else or something. I have no clue. But it's like, don't rush it. If it's not ready, push it back. Everyone else is pushing back all their other stuff, taking their time. Even Volvo this week has just announced they're pushing back the EX90 because they need to bake the software stuff a little bit more as well. There's no harm in doing that. It's better to do that and delay a vehicle and annoy pre-order people than throw something out there that is actually like borderline unsafe. It seems it's really wild. And yeah, so anyway, it's a fun little tangent I wanted to go off of here before we had too many questions. But yeah, and Abid says, "Hey Matt, curious to see the next generation of Toyota sedans. They're always seeming to buck the trends." Yeah, I'm kind of still curious to drive the Crown. It seems like the Crown doesn't really have much hype, so I've been kind of iffy about whether it's worth having me review it. But I may still end up reviewing the Crown. But I'm excited. Hopefully they'll have a new Camry and hopefully a new Corolla as well at some point. Because the Corolla is still getting a little dated at this point too. It's about ready for a new version. So we'll have to see, what ends up happening with all those. But, excited obviously for the Tacoma and, that whole teaser campaign that's been coming out. I'm excited, to see that finally here soon. And, all right. Everyone's giving Truck and Car Guy props, and I totally agree. Awesome stuff. And let me see. Marco says, "What's up, Matt? Wish I could stay, but I'm working right now. But hope all of y'all have a great chat today, and happy Mother's Day out there to all of y'all that can celebrate." Thank you so much for joining in, Marco. Totally understand about work and all that, but really appreciate the comment. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. Ace of Spades says, "Is battery tech the most important aspect of EVs moving forward? Is it the power grid, charging capabilities, or electric motor development?" I'd say it's a combination of all of those things, but I think as battery tech gets better, then infrastructure in a way becomes less important. If you're not having to rely on, a charge every 200 miles or whatever, then you don't really, it's not as big of a deal if you're, running low on a charge or something, because if you have more range, then, there's just going to be less demand on that infrastructure. But obviously, it's one of those things where also you're going to have more people buying the vehicles, and so that will even itself out. So I think it's all the above, but I think battery tech is the one thing that is going to evolve so fast. We're already seeing that. And I think as that gets better, and the vehicles get more efficient and smarter, hopefully, all that will help with those electric vehicles. Linda says, "Good afternoon. I'm sure that you have something nice planned for Beth tomorrow. All the best to her." Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. And thanks for stopping by. Yeah, we'll have a nice, relaxing day. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm going to be doing a work trip here this coming week. So just kind of laying low here and enjoying the time at home with family and all of us together before I have to hit the road. And Goth Rocker says, "I am sure due to the amount of money VinFast will eventually improve. I remember in the 1980s, Hyundai was junk. Now they sell hundreds of thousands in America." That's a very good point. And I mean, I'm hoping they do well. I never want to see a car company fail. It's just, we will see. There's just a lot of competition. And I mean, there was in the 80s as well, but with all these electric car startups, it's going to be tough to really, I think, rise above, especially Tesla. I mean, even a huge legacy automakers are struggling to, compete with Tesla. So, I mean, as far as the little startups go, it's going to be nearly impossible, I think, for a lot of them. But yeah, we'll see. They could totally improve and become one of the top brands, in a while. We'll have to wait and see. Double Struck Photo says, "A stressful week. Finally pulled the trigger on that used Taycan. Midlife crisis time." Well, congrats on pulling the trigger on the Taycan. I'll have to check it out sometime at a Cars and Coffee if you bring it out. But congrats. Hopefully I wasn't a bad influence with suggesting, live in the now, and, if you can afford it, go for it. So, but I'm glad hopefully you found one that, worked for you price wise. And yeah, you only live once, enjoy it while you can. Beth just texted me and said she's jealous, by the way, as well. So yeah, she's going to be very jealous, and she'll probably want to check out your Taycan too at a Cars and Coffee at some point. And hopefully enjoy it. I'm curious to hear how it treats you. Adam says, "The Crown makes no sense. A lifted SUV-ified car that isn't good at being either. Not sure why any Toyota fan would buy that over a Venza or a RAV4." That's a good point. I think the people that it could appeal to potentially is people who want to have a higher ride height, but for some reason don't like an SUV. Now that's a small niche of people. I totally agree. I'm not sure if it'll be a sales success, but I think, I also think that Toyota, it's one of those things where they're kind of being really honest about the consumer for that vehicle. The Avalon was typically sold to older people. And if they're going to get rid of the Avalon, what do you replace it with? Something that's higher off the ground, which is easier for older people to get into. So I think, I don't want to call the Crown like a, old person's vehicle or anything like that, because again, there's appeal for lots of people. It's not just older people that like sitting up high. Obviously, SUVs are enormously popular of all, age categories. But I think, when they see the buyer of the Avalon and what that buyer would like, a lot of them would like to probably not bend over into a low slung sedan like the Avalon. I think the Avalon went a little too sporty with its final generation. I loved it for it, but just for that buyer, I think it was a little bit too the opposite direction of where it needed to go for those buyers. And so I think the Crown will hopefully be that for them. But aside from that, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anyone else being super into it, especially with the Camry still being as hot as it is and selling as well as it is. I think anyone who, wants an actual cool sedan from Toyota can just, get a Camry still. And yeah, Goth Rocker saying how VinFast has a lot of money behind them, which is odd. Yeah, so we will see. It's a very interesting thing to follow. And let me see. So yeah, Goth Rocker also says happy Mother's Day to Beth as well. Yeah, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. Challenger Chris says Crown is like the SUV styled lifted Mustang. Makes no sense. Yeah, but I mean, those also have a market. It just comes down to changing buyer preferences in a lot of ways. And but I mean, Toyota, they may also be guilty of the same thing like Mercedes and some others have, of trying to fill too many niches and not differentiating them enough. Like the Crown, I think they should have made the Crown bigger to further differentiate it from the Camry. They basically have the same kind of legroom and stuff. So there's that kind of an overlap. Same thing with the Venza and the RAV4. It's like Venza should have been a lot bigger. Venza should have been a Highlander that's shortened, and instead it's a nicer RAV4. And a nicer RAV4, someone who wants a nicer RAV4 just goes and buys a Lexus NX. So, there are a few of those little, interesting overlaps with Toyota right now. I mean, they're huge enough that they can afford to do it and fill some niches, and it doesn't really hurt them too much. But it's just kind of interesting, some of the choices that they've decided to go with there. Two Chang says, long-term ownership lets you nitpick a car more. What car have you test driven would you want to test for a year? That's a good question. I would love to spend a year with a Civic Si because I really love the Civic Si in my first impression. But it's one of those things where, I feel like it's a car I could have really lived with and really enjoyed as a daily driver. But I would love to, really see, what that actually feels like over the long term. Is it as good in the first impression, or long term as it is in the first impression? Would I wish that I had adaptive dampers after a few months? Is the ride going to get too stiff after a while? Little things like that. That'd be one I'd like to live with. Even in an Integra, also would be kind of cool to live with, just to see, are the adaptive dampers, worth it over the SI, and kind of getting some extra info there. Aside from those ones, I mean, there's a lot of cars I'd selfishly just want to, have for a year just because I love them a lot. But it's a good question though. I don't know if there's any others. I think usually a week is pretty good. That's why I really like, doing the follow-up videos of what it's like to live with a car for a week. Because I think a week is enough time to be like, okay, what's the kind of real world fuel economy I get around me? What's this thing like after the initial first impression wears off? Are there things that start annoying me later on down the road? Are there things that come out that, I didn't notice whenever I was driving it during the day, but then I'm driving it at night, which we never drive the vehicles at night whenever I'm on these launch events. Are there things at night that I appreciate or don't like bad headlights sometimes crop up that I would have never noticed if I didn't have it for a week, or at least for more than, a daytime drive. So there's some of those types of things that are certainly helpful. And there's also some stuff too. Like I wouldn't mind living with a WRX for a year to see, does the fuel economy get better? Because I was getting terrible fuel economy over my week, and I'm like, well, maybe it was just a bad tank of gas. Maybe it's just the weather or something. I don't know, but so that's one I'd like to live with and see, because the engine also felt kind of unrefined in the new WRX. I'd like to see if, giving it some more miles would help it to kind of smooth out a little bit, get a little more polished with the drivetrain there, things like that. So I think those are my top ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Spike Money says, I also have a 23 Civic Si. Love it. Not too stiff, but I'm in California. Curious how reliable it'll be, though. Well, thanks for chiming in with your thoughts on it there. Yeah, I think, and I talked about this, I think, in the last live stream too. There is someone who's like a medical courier that just did like 250,000 miles in a 2022 Civic Touring, which also uses, the lower tune of that 1.5. And it seemed like it was totally fine. The Carfax was kind of fun because it was just like an oil change every other week, basically. But it was really cool that it is held up. At least, if you're putting the miles on quickly, age-related things may crop up down the road. But from a mileage standpoint, that thing, still seemed to be totally fine at 250,000 miles. So, hopefully that bodes well for long-term reliability for the new SI too, but we'll have to wait and see. But thanks for chiming in there. Goth Rocker says, I saw the Crown at a dealership, I think in Northeast PA. They will sell. It should be bigger. I don't think any company will ever be able to beat the mighty Subaru Crosstrek. They're everywhere. That is true. It is so funny how Subaru, not only does Subaru just have this wild following, but Subaru also can get away with stuff that other companies can't get away with, like lifted hatchbacks being, worthy crossover competitors, whereas everyone else kind of tried that a little bit, didn't work. And, they're the only ones that really could pull that off. And it's kind of funny that they have this niche that kind of allows them to have a little more leniency, I think, from buyers than some other companies for whatever reason. The Crown, I hope it does sell. I know my brother-in-law sells Toyotas, and I think they haven't gotten many Crowns in, but they don't seem to be super hot sellers. They don't have any kind of wait list for Crowns like they do for Priuses and all the other stuff. So I hope they do sell. I think it's a cool idea, and I commend, Toyota's bravery, for that, and we'll see what happens. But so let me see here. Other questions. 1992 Caleb says, I heard complaints about the MPG of the new WRX. Most Subi fans I know like it, but wanted more from it. Yeah. Yeah. And also Beth's texting at me here too about how it seems like we just noticed this the other day. We were going for a walk. It seems like at least half of all Subarus driving around have a rattling heat shield by the exhaust. I don't know if you ever, maybe this is just a unique thing that we've noticed or something. I don't know, but like I don't know if Subaru just doesn't bolt them down right, or if it's just the boxer engine that just rattles those heat shields all the time. But like it seems like every other Crosstrek I see has a rattling heat shield underneath of it. It's like it's so funny. I also, another observation about Subarus that's kind of silly, but I feel like half of the Subarus I see always have a burnt out headlight. Always. Like it's so bizarre, but I feel like Subaru uses the worst quality headlight bulbs out of any other car company, because I very rarely see a car with a headlight out, but if I do see one, it's a Subaru. Like 9 times out of 10, it's a Subaru with a burned out headlight. It's so funny. But anyway, yeah, a lot of people want more out of the new WRX, Caleb was saying. And yeah, I think with the WRX, it still has the same fuel economy basically as an STI. I think it's actually gotten worse than the FA20 in the previous generation WRX, and it's like not the direction that they need to be heading, especially with Subaru. They got to be worried about their CAFE and their ZEV status as far as the fleet averages. I mean, they don't have a single hybrid anymore when everyone basically offers a hybrid these days, just about, and like it's strange that they're the top donor to the national parks and all this stuff, and yet everything that they make, nothing gets beyond like maybe 35 mpg or something if you're lucky. It's kind of this interesting conundrum that, again, like no one calls them out on really, but it's kind of strange. They all don't get great fuel economy typically. And Double Strike Photo says, speaking of brand quirks, folks over 30 will remember Pontiac Grand Ams with fog lights always on. Okay, yeah, that's, I guess, a little bit before my time because I don't have that memory. But I did see a Grand Am yesterday, actually, and it's always, I don't know, I'm always excited to see those kinds of cars surviving because it's kind of rare to see that kind of stuff these days. And so I was kind of excited in a nerdy way that I saw Pontiac Grand Am yesterday. Two also says, on the other hand, what previous car did you write off that turned out to be a great car down the road? I don't know. That's another really good question too. I'm trying to think of stuff. I don't think there's been anything that I've written off that I later loved that I can think off of the top of my head. Usually cars, again, over a week kind of show themselves pretty good. I think there's some cars that age better, and so as time goes on, they get better with time. I think the Lexus IS350 is one example of that, where when it came out, like, it was fine, but there was a lot of other more exciting stuff. It was like when the Q50 was brand new and fresh, and you had all these other things that were a little more exciting in the powertrain department. But now, as it's gotten older, the IS350 kind of has this unique thing of having a naturally aspirated V6, which you don't get with most of the others these days, and is just kind of a smaller luxury sedan, when most of the others have grown so much. So the IS, I think, has kind of carved out a niche for itself, and I think is going to have a new customer that's kind of appreciating the smaller size, the more old school powertrain. That I think they're going to, I think, have a little bit more success with it here in these next couple of years than they have had possibly in the past. And also, everyone's kind of grown to be okay with the Lexus grille for the most part, versus when that IS first came out, it was like uglier than sin. And now it's like, okay, like it's fine. So it's kind of funny how a lot of that stuff kind of grows on all of us. I mean, like, I hated the Mach-E when it first came out, and now we own one. So, there's some of those types of things too. And a great question too. And Goth Rocker says, my mother bought a Crosstrek and she's 70, loves it, and I even have driven it. I really like the Crosstrek. That is Subaru's home run. It is a really good little vehicle for what it is, and I mean, they are totally well worth the money. I think they're really solid little vehicles, and it's great the kind of ground clearance you get on them if you live in a place where you go off the beaten path even occasionally. It's great. And I mean, my mother-in-law has a Crosstrek. My parents have a Crosstrek. They also have an Impreza hatch. So I totally get the love for the Crosstreks for sure. And Dom says, sorry, I saw Luke just did a super chat. Thank you so much, Luke, for the super chat. He says, have you driven a Toyota hybrid with the all-wheel drive in snow? I have an 18 RAV4 non-hybrid and was considering getting an all-wheel drive Prius, but I live up a hill. It's a good question. I'm trying to think if I've driven one. So I went on this, Toyota did a winter driving program like February of 2020, like right before everything went to crap. And so that was in Park City, Utah. We drove the Camry, which has a regular all-wheel drive system. We drove Avalon, which had a regular all-wheel drive system. And what else did we drive? I don't think I drove anything with the all-wheel drive. They did have the previous gen Prius with its all-wheel drive system, but I didn't drive that there. And I don't think I ever drove the all-wheel drive on snow. I don't think I actually have. That's a good question, but I don't think I have. So unfortunately, I can't give you any good answer. All I can tell you is that whenever I've spoken with Toyota executives in the past and talked with Toyota engineers about it, they've always reassured me that that battery always keeps enough in reserve, and the engine can keep that battery topped up quickly enough that you will never run out of e-axle power basically in the back. If you need that e-axle power, it will be able to provide that. And the thing, with, getting started, like if you live on a hill, I mean, even if it's a really steep hill, usually people aren't driving up a very challenging grade that is really slippery for more than a few seconds. Usually after a few seconds, you get some momentum, you get some grip, and then, you can go. Again, there's obviously some, outlier circumstances, but typically, I think the all-wheel drive system on the Toyota should be fine for, even really snowy conditions. But I would certainly love to try out an all-wheel drive Prius. Maybe that's something I can try and do this winter, because I think I'll be getting a Prius press vehicle next month, but I think it's just a regular front-wheel drive one. So whether it's, getting an all-wheel drive, regular Prius here, maybe later on, this fall or winter, that could, be a cool thing to try out in the snow, because I definitely would like to. But I've been reassured, and you can maybe go on the RAV4 forums or something and see if people have some insights there to give you a better feel for that. But from what I've been told, it should be fine. And it'll always make sure you have all-wheel drive when you need it. But great question, and thanks so much for the super chat, Luke. Let me see some other member questions here. So Dom says, do you think a full-size SUV could have a sliding door like a family van? I think it could. It's just I feel like that kind of has a stigma attached to it of, people then would say, oh, sliding door means it's a minivan, and then it becomes uncool, even if it has body cladding and, 10 inches of ground clearance. I don't know. There have been some lifted vans in the past that have gone over, okay, I guess in the 80s and stuff. So maybe, that could be something, but I just feel like, I don't know. I think that large SUV buyers are just okay with the compromise of, hurdling over a seat to get into the back. And most of them have a pretty good solution these days with either, a button, like some of the best ones just have a button that does it automatically to get into the third row, or a lever, which isn't the end of the world either. So, I think most people are just okay with that compromise for the cool factor of not having sliding doors, even though they're infinitely better. And if you talk to most parents that have multiple kids, after a while, they're just like, a minivan is just, it's worth it. Like, I don't care about having something cool. Like, it makes my life easier to have a minivan, so they get a minivan. And so I think it's just depends on the preference of the buyer. But Goth Rocker says, yes, on my 2006 Subaru Legacy had the rattling heat shield. They need to be replaced after so many heat cycles. The expansion and contraction makes them get loose and break off. Cool. Yeah, it's funny that only Subarus, I guess, it's just the design of the boxer engine, but like no other vehicles that I've seen typically. I mean, obviously, again, not 100% of the time, but it seems like, very few other vehicles have issues with rattling heat shields that I've noticed. Jacob says, Trax versus Buick and Vista, there are trims that overlap at 25 grand. What are your first impressions of choosing between such similar vehicles? I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind with the Invista is you're going to have probably less cargo capacity because it's less boxy. And the Buick's also just a little more luxurious. Now, obviously, at 25 grand, you're going to have less in the Buick than the Trax as far as feature content goes. So it just comes down to, what you like as far as, styling and, and practicality. But, I'm curious. I think I will be going on the Buick Envista drive potentially. Don't have an invite yet, but there's some talks of that. And so hopefully I'll get an invite for that because I am curious to test it because it's, again, just these insanely cheap things that are actually really nice. I was really impressed with the Trax. And so I'm really interested to drive the Envista. I think it could be a huge hit for Buick. And but yeah, I just say it comes down to what features you want as far as whether you can live with the less equipment in the Invista, but the nicer vehicle overall, that's kind of going to be the toss up there. And I see Adam S says, would you buy a Type R plus $5 grand markup or an Integra Type S at MSRP? I mean, with it only being, a $7 grand difference, I'd say 100%. If you're only paying $2 grand more for an Integra, totally worth it over the Type R, unless you like, the red interior of the Type R, the more aggressive seats. I mean, there's some things the Type R has you don't get in the Integra, but personally, yes, I would just say, yeah, if it's only a $2 grand difference, Integra all day long. Adam also, I see Luke also says another super chat here. He says, I wish the Invista they gave the 1.3 liter engine. Yeah, I don't know why they don't. I mean, because clearly it should fit. It's not like it's a big engine or anything. I don't know why they didn't upgrade it. I'm guessing it's just an easier thing to kind of copy and paste the powertrain from a production standpoint for them, but I'm not sure. And but thank you so much once again, Luke, for the super chat. And yeah, stay tuned. I'm hoping if I do review the Invista, I should have a review, I'm guessing by July, but don't hold me to that. We'll have to see, but stay tuned for that one. And Adam says, I just spent 2 days with the Lyric my parents ordered. They're Gen Xers and very overwhelmed by the infotainment. It's nice, but things like glove box and garage door opener are buried in the screen. That's kind of unfortunate, especially the garage door opener. That should just, like, what's wrong about putting that on the mirror? That's kind of interesting. Same for the glove box. Like, what's wrong with just a handle? That's strange. But I didn't know that about the Lyric. But I'm hoping to review a Lyric as well. That's what I've been asking for. I didn't do the Lyric rear-wheel drive. I was invited on that drive program, but I feel like a lot of my buyers, if you're buying an electric crossover, you probably want all-wheel drive, especially not rear-wheel drive, So I was just waiting for the all-wheel drive version. There seems to be some kind of delay as far as them rolling out the all-wheel drive one, so I'm still waiting, but I am planning on reviewing a Lyric at some point. Jazz says, agree that a larger Venza would be much better. Getting back to that point earlier. Goth Rocker says, the WRX fuel economy does not improve. My friend has one. I still get better gas mileage in my bigger, heavier all-wheel drive 3.7 liter V6 Lincoln Continental. Makes no sense to me. Yeah, it makes no sense to me either. Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, yeah, I guess with the Lincoln, you can argue the whole, like, a large motor not working hard versus a smaller motor working hard, but it's not like the WRX motor is that small. I mean, 2.4 liters is decent for, a turbo motor hauling around a 3,500 pound vehicle. I don't get it either. I don't know if it's just the boxer engine really just handicaps them with that, fuel economy stuff or what, but it's like, how did they get it so bad? I mean, it was the same fuel economy I even got in the Stinger. The Kia Stinger GT with a twin turbo V6 was getting the same fuel economy as the WRX. So I have no clue, but yeah, I know the WRXs, they're being sold pretty well right now because Subaru dealers are actually being reasonable and offering discounts on them while everyone else is still trying to go for markups. But man, I'm sure the ownership costs are not going to be fun of filling up those WRXs all the time, especially with premium. And so let me see. 2 says Luke's driveway is a rally course. Yeah, I guess, the thing is with, crossovers, it's everyone's got different needs for them. Some people just like the high ride height. Other people like, the extra capability. That's the thing about them. They're so versatile. It's great. Carlos says, hi, Matt. Hope you're doing well. Thanks, Carlos. Hope you're doing well too. Hopefully you're still enjoying SGR86 and enjoying those red line runs. 2 says, who's going to watch Fast 10? I'm curious, or I'm going and playing a drinking game. Every corny line gets 1 shot. Every family gets 3. Man, every family gets 3. You are going to be in rough shape after that movie. Yeah, I'm hoping to see Fast 10 relatively soon. I'm going to be away on a work trip whenever it comes out. So we'll have to see how soon I see it, but I definitely want to get around to seeing it. I may go next weekend. If I'm not too jet lagged, we'll have to see. But yeah, I'm curious to see how many of you, or if you guys are excited about it as well, or if that's something that's kind of, I know for a lot of people are kind of over it at this point. So I'll be curious to see. I don't know if you guys saw it. I think Vin Diesel like accidentally confirmed that they're doing a 3-part finale. So this Fast 10 is just, it was supposed to be like the second to last one. And now there's gonna be 2 more apparently. It's such a gravy train for Universal. It's like, it's one of those things you have to kind of clickbait people and be like, oh no, is it almost over? And it's like, nope, it's not. Let's keep on going and milk it for all it's worth. But as long as the box office numbers support it, I think they will find a way, to do the more spin-offs like Hobbs and Shaw and stuff to keep it running, because yeah, they got a gold mine there for sure. Double Strike Photo says, does anyone have recommendations on a high current EV charger? I do not, but if anyone else would like to chime in, definitely go for that. I've heard, a few people saying that, the juice boxes have been good for them. And there's one other one too. I can't remember the name of it, but they'll kind of have their pros and cons as far as capabilities and all that. And Adam says, I think the new Trax is a fantastic buy if you're on a budget. They probably left out all-wheel drive to not cannibalize Trailblazer sales. But if you don't need that, then a fully loaded Trax is a great value. Absolutely. Totally agree. Linda says, I had a 96 Caravan. After years of kids fighting in the back, I was in heaven with each one having their own captain chair and sliding door. Totally can appreciate that. Yeah, that would be a nice thing, I'm sure. And minivans are great. I got nothing against minivans. Beth does not like them, but I have nothing against them. I think the current crop of minivans is actually really impressive, and they do a really good job, most of those companies. And Carlos says, have you ever driven gas go-karts? I drove some last weekend, and it was a blast. The cars feel so raw and communicative. My 86 felt really heavy after driving the go-karts. Yeah, it's hard to compete with a go-kart. I've driven just the slow gas-powered ones you see at like, amusement park kind of stuff. But I've never driven any like actual fast ones. I'd love to go karting someday. I think it'd be a fun thing to try. Kyle says, hi, Matt and everyone. I was at my dealer getting my oil changed. My sales guy said he sold a 2023 C8 Z06 for $75 over MSRP. Man, whenever salesmen brag about that makes it even worse. Like, oh man, I'm not going to go on a rant about dealers, but I cannot wait for this whole restructuring of car sales. I mean, they're all going to get rid of the dealers, the manufacturers, because they don't like them either because of this crap. There's going to be a reckoning for dealers, and all I can say is at least the dealers that do markups, 100% they deserve whatever is coming down the road for them with, them being put out of a job, because this is the exact stuff. This cements their fate. Like, I'm sure dealers were or manufacturers were kind of thinking about it before, but then with the crap from the past 2 years, I wholeheartedly support every manufacturer getting rid of their dealerships as fast as they possibly can. It is just complete and utter garbage what salesmen have been doing. And I really hope consumers remember this, and that most consumers with a brain don't pay a markup. It's no car is worth a markup, in my opinion. Like, not at all. Like, I've never bought a car at markup. I never will. I just travel. I got the Bullet, even the Bullet back then in 2018. Most dealers wanted, $5,000 over. I'm like, nope, I'll drive 4 hours and go get it there from a dealer for MSRP. The Mach-E last summer, everyone around us, for the most part, wanting markups and playing games with people and selling cars out from underneath people and saying they'd sell it for MSRP and then, giving them a bait and switch at the very last minute. And I found a dealer 2 hours away that was straight up totally fine. I spoke with the owner whenever we picked the car up, and he's like, yeah, we do enough volume. We don't need to do markups. He's like, we don't mark any of our stuff up because we just sell so many more vehicles, and with a Ford dealer, you don't have to worry quite as much about the supply stuff, especially after the first initial hit and of the chip shortages there. It got better, and so that's what I've always said is these dealers just need to do more volume, make your profit that way, and then the manufacturer's even happier with you because you're moving more of their cars. Everybody wins. People get good deals, more cars are put on the road there for the manufacturer, and the dealer gets a piece of every one of those pies. They make all their money in the back end anyway with putting them on the road, getting them out so that they can service them, financing them, all that stuff. Beating people up over the sticker price and charging markups is just incredibly short-sighted and stupid in my opinion. And it's that is strikes such a nerve with me still. Anyway, but Carla says Fast 10 trailer had about 10 times that they said family. Yeah, so 2 is going to be hammered at this debut. If anyone wants to go and have a really fun time at the Fast 10 debut, go with 2. It's going to be really, really a good time with him. I'm sure it'll be hilarious. Carla says also, yes, I'm loving my 86 still. It's even more fun now that I'm getting more comfortable with the car. Every drive is so fun. I don't want to stop driving it. That's awesome. I'm so glad that you're enjoying it. And yeah, they're fun cars. I'm living vicariously through you, Carlos, because I still wish I could justify a GR86 myself. It is so tempting. Oh man. And actually, so I will explain in my bullet update for the 5-year update in July, whenever I do that video. But there was a little hiccup with the bullet late last year that for a split second made me consider getting rid of it for a GR86. And then I've since come back and I'm like, you know what? I really love the bullet. I'm going to keep it. But oh man, if there is one car I would buy in a heartbeat tomorrow, that is one. I wouldn't need to think twice about it. And Goth Rocker says Subarus have extensive heat shields because of the Boxer engine. Engineers feel because the Boxer engine is lower to the ground, they worry if you park over high grass or leaves with hot exhaust. Interesting. Okay, thanks for the insight, Goth Rocker. I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense as far as why they have more heat shields. Thank you for the enlightenment there. And now that solves one of my big questions. I appreciate that. Jazzbo says minivans are sort of nerdy. There was an advertisement about your guidance counselor said you would not amount to anything and you would end up driving a minivan. Okay. So there's some kind of stigma there from some of that stuff in the past. I see. And I mean, yeah, I can totally see, minivans were kind of ho-hum and boring for a while there. But I think these days they're all really funny. It's so funny too. Like some of these V6 powered minivans, they are some of the most burnout happy vehicles that I ever drive as far as front wheel drive stuff goes, because most other front wheel drive stuff doesn't have V6s anymore. And they're so torquey in the Pacifica and the Odyssey especially. I had an Odyssey in winter. If you watch my review, I talk about it in that, but that Odyssey just wanted to do burnouts everywhere. It was just like hilarious. I think the only other thing that did more burnouts than the Odyssey was the Sonata N-Line. And that's saying something. I mean, it's like they're actually really fun to drive, a lot of these minivans. It's call me crazy, maybe I'm getting old or something, but I think minivans are kind of cool in their own way. And so let me see here. Jazzbo says there are different types of markups, adding nitrogen in tires and other stuff and making you buy it. So there's soft markups. Yeah, which I also think is so stupid and annoying as well, trying to pull one over on people. And Goth Rocker also says, Matt, agree, never ever pay markup. Cars are a depreciating asset. People that pay markup are causing this problem. Yeah, and I do have to say, as a caveat, if there is a vehicle that you really think fits you the best and, your car just got totaled last week and you need to buy a car and you don't have the time to travel to a dealer that, doesn't do markups or something, like, I understand there are some instances where, you really are in a tough spot and you have to pay it. I'm not looking down on anyone for paying markups, but I just think that no one has to, as long as you don't need to have the first one of whatever car that is. If you have patience, you have some time to call around, make a road trip out of it. I don't think you need to pay a markup as long as you have the patience. And Double Strike Photo says, always push back on crap like that and walk away if they don't back down. As far as the nitrogen tires and all that stuff, definitely agree. Wheat Man says, good afternoon. Thanks for joining, Wheat Man. Thanks for being a member, by the way, over 12 months. I really appreciate all that support. And I saw Kyle and Dom and a few of you others have also been supporting for over a year. And I really appreciate the long-term support there. It means a lot. And Adam says, when we picked up my parents' Lyric, the dealership added 5,000 cash markup and 3,000 in dealer add-ons like alarm system and tracking. I had to negotiate them off, really soured them on the brand. Yeah, and this is why the manufacturers want to get rid of them because yeah, it's a bad reflection on the brand, and not only is it just a bad reflection, but also it hurts sales. I think, Honda, that's why they had such a huge sales hit last year. Part of it was because they didn't have a lot of inventory and they were some of the worst as far as inventory shortages. But also, like everyone was like, I was gonna buy a Civic Si, but they wanted 5 grand over the Double X at the Subaru dealer. They were doing 2 grand off. I went for the Double X, and I think that there's so many of that stuff and so many people that could have been converted by the new SI or the Integra or other vehicles that then were just like, you know what, I'm not dealing with this. I'm going to go to a dealer that's actually reasonable. And it's done so much damage to brands and I hope it does damage to the dealerships and people remember those crappy dealers and try and find a better one in the future for servicing and stuff like that. And it's just yeah, it's a shame. Adam says to answer the EV charger question, almost all home boxes max out at 48 or 50 amps, but a good 50 amp model is the charge point home flex. There you go. Thanks for chiming in, Adam. Dom says I saw a Carnival, looks great and drives pretty decent. Yeah, they're solid things. They still got the V6, same great motor from the Telluride basically. And the Carnival I think looks great. It looks like a Range Rover minivan. It's great. The only thing about the Carnival that's not great is the piano black plastic everywhere. I don't know what they were thinking with that. That is the biggest screw up as far as minivan interiors. But aside from that, I love the Carnival. And I see we've caught up to the member questions. So VQ saying R63 AMG was an interesting concept. I'd definitely be interested in Odyssey Type R for sure. That would be sweet. That would be really cool if they did something like that someday. I just feel like there's probably like 5 people who would actually buy that, unfortunately. But I wish it would be something that could actually be, a profitable thing for a company. And let me see. Linda says, with a husband, 2 children, 4 dogs, and all the luggage that we had to carry, a minivan was my dream car. Now with only a husband and grown kids and 0 dogs, I'm loving my Mustang. That's awesome. Glad you're enjoying the Mustang. And hopefully you've been able to get more info on the Prius Prime. I know you're considering one of those, Linda. I think they're starting to show up at dealers here, so hopefully you can check one out if you're still curious about those. And R8 World says, what is your opinion on Gen 1 Audi R8s, V8 or V10? I mean, they are awesome. I still love the styling on those. I think that's one of the few cars from that era that has aged really well. I think the R8s, they were really futuristic at the time and really spaceshipy. I remember the first time I saw an R8, because I worked at an Audi dealer back then, when the first one came in, I mean, that thing looked like a UFO when it was brand new. It was so out there and wild. But I think it still looks so good to this day. As far as V8 or V10, I got to go V10. It just sounds so much better. It's just an amazing motor. And those, I mean, both, V8 and V10s are going to appreciate, I'm sure, but the V10s seem to be appreciating even faster. But I would definitely go V10 if you can. Goth Rocker says, I have to say the best minivan is the Chrysler Pacifica. I know the reliability long-term could be questionable, but now with all-wheel drive, that Pacifica is a really luxurious van, quiet and smooth. Yeah, and I think that's, if I had to pick a minivan to buy, I would say Pacifica for me as well. Because again, you have the option for the all-wheel drive. And if you don't want the all-wheel drive, then you have the plug-in hybrid, which I'm still amazed none of the others have done a plug-in hybrid yet. Like Chrysler's the first one to do a plug-in hybrid minivan. It's just wild. But so yeah, I love the Pacific. I think it's the plushest. It has the best infotainment. It's, I think, some of the nicest styling. They're really solid. They're proven. Chrysler knows how to build minivans. So do the others. But Sienna's just kind of underpowered. Odyssey's kind of outdated. And then Carnival, just again, kind of interesting with the choices on the interior there. So for me, Pacifica is where it's at. If we're crush up in minivans here. Dom says, I hope cars get away from the piano black. No benefit to having that. What is your preference for interior materials? For me, I mean, my favorites I think are like open pore wood is great. Anything with a texture to it that's not glossy is always nice. Another thing I really like too, like if you see in the new Civic, there's like gray plastic, but it just has a little bit of a texture to it. It's still kind of glossy underneath the texture, but there's a little texture to it there. It doesn't feel super expensive, but it's just something different and nice. And it just shows a little creativity, even if you can't, have something super high end and expensive. I think that's, always a nice option. One other option I really love, basically only Audi does it, but Audi in their RS vehicles, especially in like the RS7, the RS6 Avant, they have like a carbon weave, but it's not like glossed over or anything. It's like actual like woven carbon. I don't know what it actually is. I don't think it's actual carbon, but it's like a carbon fiber thing, but it's an open weave. It has a textile kind of texture to it. And it's a really premium feeling material. while being unique and different and feeling expensive, looking expensive, but not being the usual wood or metal or, glossy carbon fiber, which I'm kind of over on interiors as well. So I like stuff with texture to it personally. But I'll be curious to see what you guys think about your interior preferences as well. And sorry, I got my computer here making noise. Two says minivans are weak. Me pulling up in a supercharged Previa and Matt's GR Previa. We know you're a shell like Donatello, Teenage Mutant Turtle. Matt. Man, I love the Previas. Those were so cool. That's another, some people are like, oh, Toyota's finally cool now. And I'm like, Toyota has always been cool. The Previa, like a mid-engine supercharged minivan. Like, come on, like how it's just so awesome the stuff that they did even back then in the 90s. I know they kind of had a little bit of a less impressive phase here in the early 2000s and stuff, but man, like, yeah, supercharged Previas, those things should be going for 10 times the prices they're going for, because that is a vehicle that is so quirky but so cool and so rare, honestly, too, that I mean, man, that thing is, they're so cool. I'd love to drive one of those someday. And Dustin says he wanted a van just to accommodate his dogs, and that makes sense too, because you have all the storage space, but you don't have the high liftover, ride height and all that kind of stuff, and yet you still have a high seating position. So it's kind of the best of both worlds and all that way. And John says it would be sick if they made a high performance van. I agree. I hope someone does it someday. We'll just have to wait and see if someone ever does. I think that really the first thing you can see from a high performance van, Chrysler is definitely working on an electric minivan, and so I think with those platforms, obviously you don't need to have a lot of power, but it's very easy, to swap in one of those little, electric motors with more power than, a normal version and have a really fast minivan. And I think, Stellantis is one of the few companies crazy enough to potentially do it. Toyota could as well, but I think with Toyota and what they're working with in their powertrain toolbox, the best we can hope for is a Sienna Prime that, could just do 300 horsepower. Still would be great. Nice improvement over the current Sienna's, power. But I think that's as best as we're going to get from Toyota. Realistically, I mean, I could be proven wrong and they could do something else, but it'd be cool to see high performance van for sure. And the technician says, any word on when the 2024 Camry is coming out? No word yet. It's very much not overdue, but it is very well due. So, we'll have to see. I don't know exactly when it's coming, but hoping that it's coming here sometime in the next year or two. But we'll have to wait and see. Challenger Chris says Dodge Hellcat Caravan. I wish they would have done that. It was, I think Tim Kuniskis of Dodge, their CEO, I think he actually alluded to that as kind of like a joke a while back, that it, something about like doing a fast minivan is something they could potentially foresee see themselves doing down the road. Maybe obviously the Hellcat days are over as far as supercharged V8s at least. So we'll have to see, but. I'd love to see a fast minivan for sure someday. And Truck and Car Guy says, if Dodge wanted to Hellcat swap a wagon, I have one for them. Yeah, I know that project you have is awesome. And someone ought to do a Hellcat minivan if they haven't yet, because that would be a fun project. Double Strike Photo says, my wife just got an Audi e-tron SUV, lots of open wood, got to learn how to protect it. Yeah. I think, some of the trim, at least the stuff on the dash, obviously you don't have to worry about it too much, but the stuff around the cup holders and all that, yeah, it's definitely going to be a little iffy. But I know like even, Beth had open pore wood in her last Mercedes, and over a 3-year lease, that wood never got messed up or anything. I mean, we didn't put a ton of miles on it, but, it seems to wear pretty well, clean out pretty easily, unless you, spill coffee all the time or something. But I think it should be okay, hopefully. And two says Matt is still stalling like he doesn't own a GR Previa. Man, I wish I did. I wish that was a thing. That would be a really fun little project car or something if I ever had the time. All right, World says, are you planning to come to Dubai at all for a visit? The car content here is amazing. I know I've seen all of like Shmi's videos and stuff from Dubai. It seems like it's an awesome time, especially for supercar lovers like myself. I love the high-end stuff. So for me, it'd be a lot of fun. No plans to come to Dubai ever, but I'd love to visit someday. I had one of my close friends went to Dubai for a little bit of time and really loved it. And I have another old friend who lived in Qatar for a while too and really loved it there. And so, yeah, I'd definitely love to visit someday, but no plans currently. And Elmar says, what day are you going to drive the Grand Highlander? I'll be driving it very, very soon. I can tell you, Omar, you do not have much longer to wait. I can't say specifically yet, but I do now know when I will be driving it and when the embargo lifts, but I'm not at liberty to say right now, but it won't be too much longer. Okay. So I promise you'll have all the answers on the Grand Highlander here very soon. Garrett says, with the most affordable sports cars being co-developed with two brands, would you like to see which two car brands would you like to see partner for a new sports car project? I'd love to see Honda do a new S2000 and Chevy do some type of new little convertible sports car and have their version. I think that would be fun. Honda and Chevy already have partnerships with hydrogen stuff, with electric stuff. And so I think they already have a working, friendship there they've had for decades, honestly. And I think that the two of them partnering up could be really good because they both have really excellent engineers that I think could kind of vibe and, work on kind of having the same kind of goals potentially for a fun little, sports convertible thing. So I think that's kind of a partnership I'd love to see. Otherwise, though, what's another one? I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff. I was excited about the whole Rimac Hyundai thing, and then I don't know if that fell apart or what, where they were talking about using Rimac electric components combined with hydrogen stuff that Hyundai was working on and doing something like that. But I'm not sure if that's not happening anymore or what. But that's another one that off the top of my head I can think of. But I'm sure there's lots of others. If any of you anyone else has any ideas, definitely chime in here. VQ says it's going to say the Solstice in the sky, but just remember both brands are gone. Yeah, which is the unfortunate thing. But if they want to use one of the names still, call it the Chevy Sky or something like that, that could work too. Goth Rocker says, Matt, knowing you, the one bad thing about the old Previa vans, they are horrible in crash tests. Yeah, I mean, everything from that era basically is. Otherwise, they're really cool. My uncle had one in the 90s. It even had all-wheel drive. Yeah, that's another thing. They had the all-wheel drive too. They just had it all. It's a brilliant vehicle back then. But yeah, that's really the holdup with a lot of classic cars. It wouldn't be something I would drive on a daily basis because, yeah, all that stuff's very unsafe. But I mean, classic cars from like the 40s and the 50s that I love are terrible. I mean, those things, the steering column will like impale you and, they basically just crumple in and just wreck you if you ever get hit with one of them. So, yeah, it's, one of those things, I still want a classic car someday, but it'd be something I'd be very careful when I drive, very sparingly for sure. Dom says Toyota 08, bad gen, impressed with what they're doing. What do you think is the most impressive company currently? I think American company is Dodge, Japan is Toyota, Korea is the Kia Group, Europe is questionable. I think most impressive car company currently overall for me, I'm really just super impressed all the time with Toyota and with Hyundai and Kia as well. I think they make some of the most exciting stuff, the most impressive stuff, and just some of the best stuff out there currently. Excuse me. So those are probably my favorites. And then as far as Europe goes, I don't know. It's tough for me to have a favorite from Europe without going into the exotic stuff because I would just say Ferrari. But there's others as far as the mainstream stuff. I think between the big three in Germany, I'd have to say Audi is my favorite between them and BMW and Mercedes, just from what I've driven and just the styling and the direction and the fun stuff. Audi's doing the RS3 and stuff. And yes, there's a CLA 45 and, the BMW M2s and stuff. They're all their own fun little niches. But I think the stuff I get most excited about is the Audi stuff, I think, out of the Europeans. Two says Chevy Sky sounds like a WWE wrestler. You're right, it kind of does. Andy, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, sold my STI, now looking for a 6-speed F80. Hope I don't regret it. Yeah, I wish I had more info on, those BMWs as far as what they're like to live with and stuff. Just haven't had very many opportunities to drive them. But hopefully you find something you like and something fits you well. But the STIs are fantastic. If you want something, I mean, I guess you're going for a little more luxury with the BMW, because otherwise I'd say if you want something in the same, style as the STI GR Corolla, if you can get your hands on one, I think it's kind of the spiritual successor to the STI in a lot of ways, and is a really fun little car. I'm still hoping to get one of those this summer. Haven't gotten it scheduled yet, but I'm hoping to get a GR Corolla press vehicle to live with and really see how that one's like over a week too. And Caleb says Porsche is another one for Europe. Yeah, that's definitely another solid pick there. Porsches they're so expensive. And in some cases, I'm not sure it's worth the price premium over some of the competitors. That just, paying the Porsche tax is just, it's a little tough sometimes. I kind of ranted about that with the new 718 Spider RS and yesterday's weekly update. That's so much more expensive. And yes, you get the GT3 motor instead of the regular 4-liter, flat six. But oh man, it's just a lot of money for a Boxster. And it's like 160 grand to start. Just like, whew, I don't know. I think Porsche's kind of really gone off the deep end with their pricing a little bit because they can get away with it. People are paying it. So, jack up the prices and rake in the cash, I guess. And Gothrocker says the option prices on Porsches are insane as well. They're doctor and lawyer cars. Yeah, but I think they're even pricing out doctors and lawyers too. Because I feel like most doctors and lawyers aren't driving around in something any more expensive than like $100,000 vehicle typically. So I feel like even getting $100,000 Porsche is not a whole lot these days, unless you're getting a Macan. You get a nice Macan for that money. But Cayenne's a nice Cayenne's. I'm usually over that price at this point. Panameras are over that. Taycans typically are over that, at least for new ones for the most part. There's really very few Porsches you can get nicely equipped for under 100 grand these days, at least new. So it's just like, yeah, it's crazy. And Caleb says, I want to use Cayman GT4, but they're still expensive. Yeah. My friends, I have a friend who actually did order and buy a Cayman GTS 4.0. But he was pretty smart about being real stingy on options, and he was able to get his for, I think he paid around 90 for his, maybe a few grand over that. But he actually was able to get a reasonably priced GTS 4.0, no markup or anything like that. So but it's the GT4s are they're fantastic. I drove in the new GT4. It's amazing, but just so expensive for what it is. And yeah, Caleb says the Macans are overpriced as well. Yeah, I agree. They're pricey, but they're fun. From what I've heard, I've never driven a Macan, but they seem like great vehicles. Just very, very expensive. And minivans or Pokemon. C Square says they'll be back in fashion. Maybe that could be the next big thing potentially. There was some talk. I think in the last live stream we were talking about what may take over as the new thing after crossovers have kind of had their day in the sun, and I think that's one of the ideas. Either minivans can become popular or you just have sedans come back into favor with a lot of people as well. Spy Harpy says sore spot on direct injection is carbon buildup on intake valves. Oh, as far as the BMWs, I heard Toyota has direct and port injection on some of their cars. Why don't all manufacturers do this to avoid this issue? So I actually have some interesting insight about that. Since you mentioned that, so a lot of companies do have it. Like my Mustang has it, and the Bullet it has that. That was one of the changes they did in 2018 for that 5-liter Coyote motors. That has that as well. Toyota has it. Subaru has it as well, in a lot of their stuff too. And some of the others, I think some of the Europeans are starting to do that as well because they realize that is a good thing. But like if you watched in my Mazda CX-90 review, I noted that how that only had direct injection. And I actually sat down with the chief powertrain engineer of Mazda and sat down and hung out with him for like a half an hour and just chatted with him. And that was one of the questions I asked him is like, why did you only do direct injection on the CX-90? Are you not worried about the, intake valves getting caked up there with the carbon? And he said, it's about how you tune it. He says that they're convinced that they have nailed the tuning for their engines as far as how to properly do direct injection without carbon buildup. And so he says they've looked at their long-term data on the Mazda 3 because that's had the direct injection for a while. And he's like, we look at our warranty data, our reliability data, doesn't seem to be an issue for us. He says, if you go and look, he's like, go to a parking lot, look at how many Mazdas have any kind of caking around the exhaust tips, because if you see the sooty black exhaust tips, that's an indication of that extra carbon and that's not only building up on that exhaust tip but also potentially on those ports and stuff. He says go through a parking lot, see how many other cars have that soot buildup, especially the European cars have a ton of that stuff typically on the exhaust tips. He's like, look at a Mazda, you'll never see that kind of buildup on a Mazda exhaust tip. He's like, we've really just gotten the tuning down, and they think that as a result, they have no carbon buildup, on an actual problem level at least. And so to them, they say it's just that. So maybe other car companies agree with Mazda, and it's just about the tuning. And, I don't know why the Europeans have so much of it, if it's just a compromise they're willing to make because they're not worried about long-term reliability, or if it's just something that they just need to achieve a certain horsepower level or whatever the case is. And so they're just willing to, have the carbon buildup as a result. The other thing though is you do add some complexity and you do add some extra money and cost there when you go for direct and port injection, because then you're doing two technologies at the same time and you have two different mechanisms that you have to put into the engine versus one. So there's a little bit, extra complexity there. But I agree. I love the direct and port injection. That's one of the reasons why I love the Bullet, and I'm excited about that as a long-term vehicle, because that's something I'm not having to worry about in the long term. Bruce says, with the affordable car brands wanting to be more upmarket, will we see base prices above 30,000 or even higher? It's kind of just going to come down to inflation, I think, for a lot of it. I've heard a lot of people recently been saying that 30 is the new 20 as far as car prices go. And with inflation, and you keep that in mind and what a dollar is worth and that change, eventually every car will, yes, be over $30,000. Just give, inflation time. Just one of those things. It's a natural thing that happens, and, it will creep up. Inevitably, whether that happens sooner or later will, come down to, the Fed's policies and just, everything else in the world. But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely see that at some point. And as far as the upmarket thing, I think, like Moss is kind of smart to do that and kind of be a little more premium, because I think that helps to offset the inflation rise there and help people feel like, people are stuck in the whole, like, this car should be $25,000. Why is it 35? And it's like, okay, but at least it's a little more luxurious now. So for some people, they can make their peace with that change without having to reconcile the fact that, yes, it's just inflation. This is normal. I just need to readjust my brain and calibrate for the new stuff. And obviously wages haven't risen with that inflation. So there are still some other pressures there that's causing people to resist, adjusting their, pricing, I guess, in their own mind. But, it's just inflation, I've heard, a lot of older people being like, man, I remember when I could have bought a brand new car for $7,000 and buy a brand new car for 10,000 and 15 and 20. And, it just depends on when you were born as far as what seems like an appropriate price for an entry level vehicle. And, some people just adapt to that change better than others, from a psychological standpoint. But Dom, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I saw a couple of stingers yesterday. What's the proper name for a Kia group? Remind me, what do you think about the Kia Genesis coupes? So the Kia group is actually Hyundai. So it's Hyundai Motor Company is the overarching brand that encompasses Kia as well. And Hyundai Genesis coupes, I love. I reviewed the turbo and the V6 versions way back when. So you can go watch those videos for all my actual thoughts while I was in the driver's seat there. But I think they're great little vehicles. I know reliability isn't great. I think the transmissions kind of screw up in the manuals a good bit. I'm trying to think of other things I've heard. Those older turbo motors also aren't foolproof. So there's some things there, but I think overall they seem to be pretty good. And these days are probably a pretty solid value too, as long as you're okay with, not having it be quite as reliable as maybe an Accord V6 coupe or, something else like that. But I think they're pretty good. Tom, thank you so much for the nice super chat here. He says, hi, Matt. I was wondering, what's your opinion on the Focus ST versus Elantra N? I own a Focus ST with quite a bit of mods. I love my car, but the shifter feel and action has always been a love-hate relationship. So I will say, the Elantra N, if you're specifically talking about the shifter, that component isn't the best part of the Elantra N. I'd actually say the Elantra N shifter is one of the least impressive things about the Elantra N. It has so much other things going for it that I don't dwell on the transmission, but it's not the best manual out there, in my opinion. And I'd say it's been a long time since I drove a manual Focus ST, so I'm not a great reference point as far as comparing the two. But from my memory, I would say the Focus ST probably actually felt a little better than the Elantra N shifter. Again, from a very foggy memory. So, I mean, don't take that to the bank. But, I would say if you want a real good shifter action, you got to go with a Honda. They can't be beat. I think there's just hands down the best out there from a shifter standpoint. And some others have gotten close, but none of them beat the Hondas. I still think the Honda shifters are just so good. The only one that I think gets close and potentially might even be a little bit better than the Honda shifter is the manual shifters in the Cadillac Blackwings, which again, way more than Elantra N pricing. So probably irrelevant if you're shopping in that price segment there. But that's the only one that I think I've ever found that I'm like, this may actually be better than a Honda shifter. But aside from that, I think if you want a real good shifter, I would say either, spend the money on a Type R if you can stretch to that, or see how an SI or an Integra A-Spec feels to you. You'll have a lot less fun and power than the Elantra N because that is still so much fun and so much more power, so much drama, so much more customization. I think that's why I would still pick an Elantra N over the SI or the Integra personally, because they're just, the exhaust crackles and pops. You don't get any of that stuff in the Honda and the Acura. There's just so many things about the Elantra N that are so much fun that the shifter is fine. And so as long as you don't need an exceptional shifter, I'd still just go Elantra N personally. Yeah, if you're in search of a good shifter, you gotta go with a Honda. Thank you so much though for the super chat, Tom. I appreciate it. And let me know if you have any other follow-up questions. I'll try and keep an eye out for them here as well. Let me see. So Double Strike Photo says, I hear Porsche buyers are super good looking and smart, especially the people who buy Taycans, I gotta say, I'm sure. But yeah, I know. And I think you do the smart thing, the Double Strike, with going for a used Taycan, because I'm sure you save a good bit of money there, and hopefully you got a good deal on it and all that. But yeah, it's one of those things that, hey, if you can afford it, by all means, they are fantastic, I'm sure, and totally, worth it if you have the disposable cash for it. Goth Rocker says, I read Mazda's really tuning the cleanest direct injection engines. He's right. I never see dirty exhaust tips on Mazdas. I still would like having both technologies, but I am sure Mazda knows. Yeah. And I think, for them, they're also, just a smaller company. So they're trying to, keep things as lean as possible. And so again, they're confident that they have it really cleanly tuned there. So yeah, they just don't bother with it. Carstack Wood says, I have 80,000 on my 16 Mazda 6, and my mechanic took a look at my valves and said they were perfectly fine, no carbon buildup. Well, there you go. All right. Well, just proved the engineer's point there. Thanks for chiming in with that, Carstack Wood. That's great to hear too. For anyone who's considering a Mazda, there you go. You don't have to worry about that. And it's awesome. Mazda, it's really impressive what Mazda does with such limited means. And as small of a company as they are really good. And Goth Rocker also says Mazda has a great shifter. I agree. Mazda does have a very good shifter. That is another one. I wish I had more time in a manual Mazda 3. I didn't get a chance to drive it for more than 15 minutes, back in 2019 when that launch event happened. I've never seen a manual Mazda 3 since. There is one person who offered one to me. I just have to make the road trip to go film it because I am hoping to do a follow-up video on that car. But there's another one. Miata shifter, especially. Very, very good. And that does get close to the Honda as well. It's not, I don't think it's quite as good as the Honda, but it is very, very close to. So that's another one. If you're considering one of those, Tom, Mazda 3, if you're okay with less power, not having a turbo, Mazda 3 hatch with the manual could potentially be another good solution there if you're looking for something with a good manual experience. But anyway, Linda, thank you so much for the very kind super chat. I don't see any kind of message attached, but thank you so much. I'll keep an eye out if you have any other messages here. Dom, thank you so much also for the super chat. He says, Happy Mother's Day, Beth. I'm glad the Mach-E is going well. Yeah, it's doing great. Just passed 4,000 miles. And yeah, we're still really loving it. But thank you so much, both of you, for the super chats. I really appreciate it. Let me see here. Also, Linda, I see you did also have another comment here. My 74 Mustang was 4,000, but my salary is only 6,700. I saved for a year to pay cash, and it was my daily for 12 years. That's awesome. I'm still considering the Prius, but they are elusive. Yeah, they're tough to find. And I know that especially this year, they're going to be kind of production limited as they ramp up, but there'll be more of them for sure next year. I think they're going to be doubling or tripling production of those next year. So hopefully that'll help if you're not in a hurry. But that's good insight though, about salaries and all that. Everyone likes to cite, I spent 30 grand on my house back in 1980. It's like, yes, but you were making 20 grand a year and happy about it back then. It's like, it's all relative. But Carlos says, if you ever justify getting a GRE6, I would recommend placing your order with Haley Toyota of Richmond. They do MSRP and they're able to get mine in 2 months. That's really a quick turnaround. That's impressive. Unfortunately, so since my brother-in-law is a Toyota salesman, I'm probably going to be stuck with their Toyota dealer unless he tries to do a markup on me if I ever were to buy one, which I would not accept. Then I would definitely check out Haley Toyota. So thanks for the Thanks for the tip there on that. Speaking of interesting Toyota dealer experiences, I don't know if you guys have been seeing this. This has been a thing for a while, but I just for the first time this past week, we got in the mail a scratch off thing from one of the local Toyota dealers. And actually, I'll name them because it's really sleazy that they do this. Barrel Toyota here in the Pittsburgh area. They sent out these like scratch off things of like you can scratch off and see if you won money, and you go into the dealer, and they make it seem like pretty credible because like we did the scratch off just for fun, just to see, because they're all winners typically, and it's like sure enough you won, and like there's like 4 prizes, but there's only 3 scratch off things, so it's not super specific that like this scratch off winner means you get this amount of money. And when you look at the fine print, it's like, most people will get like $5, or they'll get a free pair of headphones or some like BS thing instead, but it's just like a bait and switch thing to try and get people in. But it's actually deceptive, like making people think like you won money when they didn't. And it's like so sleazy. So if you're getting that kind of stuff in the mail, even if it looks relatively legit, don't fall for it. It's a well-documented scam, basically. I mean, yes, you do get something, so it's legal. You get $5 or something, but it's not worth being harassed by a salesman and all that. So these dealers, there's no bottom for some of them. It's just as sleazy as they can get. It's just so gross. And Carlos said the Mazda 3 manual was awesome. Had one for 2 years before my 86. Well, that's awesome. I'd love to hear more of your impressions on what it's like there. But yeah, I'm glad you had a good time with it. Hopefully the ref hang wasn't bad or anything like that. And Linda, thank you so much. She says a little extra for Beth for Mother's Day. Very much appreciated. Thank you. It's very sweet of you, Linda. 2 says, with Hyundai, Honda, Toyota, Kia, and Subaru bringing in performance cars, are we headed back to the return of the Rice Rocket Wars? I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I think any, Rice Rocket stuff is going to be short-lived because, all this stuff will be going mostly electrified here, in the next 10 or 15 years. So I think we're kind of in, one of these heydays. Like, once again, we're kind of in the golden years of the horsepower wars from, this year back to, 2015, really, when the Hellcat started. And even before then with, the revival of the Camaro and the retro Mustang back in 2005 and stuff. So I think we kind of saw the muscle era, and that's kind of going to be mostly over. We'll see how it changes here with the new Charger and, if there's ever a new Camaro or something. But in the meantime, it seems like, that's kind of, going the way of the 70s there as far as that stuff goes. And then, now we have the Rice Rocket stuff, as you called it, kind of coming in and also having a lot of fun there, and kind of a resurgence of that whole nostalgia from the 90s and the 80s. And we'll see how long that lasts. But I think, as stuff gets more and more expensive and wages don't go up to meet that, I think you're going to see more and more people, going for the more affordable stuff. And I hope that carves out a larger niche for stuff like the GR86 and vehicles like that. I don't know if you guys follow Jason Camisa. He's a brilliant reviewer, one of my favorite reviewers out there. He does the Haggerty videos and some others, but I follow him on Instagram, and he does like Instagram write-ups on some vehicles that he spends a week with. And he just did a really good little write-up on Instagram on the M2. And the consensus at the end of it is he's just like, it's good in some cases, but he really didn't like a lot of stuff about the M2. And he's like, I could buy 2 GR86s for the price of this M2. And he's like, all day, every day, he'd buy a GR86 too over an M2. So, it's kind of interesting how some of these affordable stuff, that and the Miata, are just so good these days that it really erodes the appeal for some of these more expensive vehicles, especially in the sports car realm, because they get overcomplicated. They have too much tech, and a lot of sports car buyers don't want a ton of tech. They want, a basic little screen to, do their CarPlay like you get in the Toyota and the Mazda, and that's it. That's all you need, So I think I think the appeal is going to grow for the affordable, small engine kind of stuff, especially if gas prices keep going up. There's talk about gas prices hitting record highs again this summer, and, them cutting back on production just because they want to price gouge people for the last few years that they can rake people over the coals before electric stuff becomes more mainstream. So they're squeezing every penny out of people while they can, I guess. So, I think you'll see a lot of people being like, well, do I want to spend double the price of, gas for some of these more expensive things, or, go for something cheaper? But Bruce says, how do you determine the quality of manual transmissions? For me, it's just really a feel thing. As far as, does it feel substantial? Do I grind the gears? Do I ever miss shift? because I mean, I've been driving a manual now for, I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best manual driver, but I've been driving a manual for almost 17 years, 16 or 17 years now. So I feel like I have a decent handle on driving a manual. And there's some vehicles where I still grind like a 1-2 shift. And it's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't me. And then when I talk to other journalists, they're like, oh yeah, it was grinding for me too. So I'm like, okay, well, this is actually just the transmission. It's not the best. And I mean, some of it, that's a quirk. Some transmissions don't like to be rushed. It's just part of the character of the vehicle. You learn to live with it. It's not the end of the world. But just as far as who makes the best manuals, I've never been grinding a shift or missed a shift in a Honda transmission. I never grinded a gear or missed a shift in the Cadillac Blackwings, but they just also have a really weighty feel where it's not overboard. It's not like an aftermarket stiff like shifter, but it's also not some little like joystick that doesn't feel like it's connected to anything. So it's like a lot of things with feel, where same thing with steering. It's kind of a personal thing for some people, but it's just like, heavy enough that it feels substantial, but not so light that it just feels like it's, a video game controller. It's kind of that thing, I think, is for me, the quality, and also just, how stout they feel, how they hold up to abuse. Things like that also, will indicate a good transmission too. But I'm curious to hear if any of you others have any. Sorry, I'm like getting scratchy with my throat here. If any of you others have any thoughts on manuals and what you like and dislike about them. Sang says my Kia Forte manual feels exactly like a Logitech G29. Yeah, so see, that would probably fall in the camp of not the best in my opinion, but for some people, maybe that's okay. It just comes down to personal preference. And Carlos says the Mazda 3 manual was awesome. And the rev hang wasn't bad on the Mazda 3. I added a rear sway bar on it and a rear motor mount, and it was completely transforming the car to a fun daily. That's awesome. I'm glad that it turned out to be a good car for you. And Carlos said, which manual that you recently reviewed did you absolutely hate? I don't know if there's been one that I've really hated, but I can say, like, when mentioning the grinding of the gears, both the Super manual and the GR Corolla manual, I was grinding gears in both of those, and I talked to other journalists, and other people were also grinding gears in both of those as well. So those would be the two that I'd say right now could use a little more work from a polish standpoint. But as far as other manuals I absolutely hated, most of the stuff in current stuff I think is pretty good. The only other couple ones that I don't know if it's the manual shifter that I dislike, but I just don't like rev hang. Obviously, no one really likes rev hang. And so like the previous Gen Civic Si had really bad rev hang. That was really hard to be smooth with. Toyota Corolla manual also, which I guess now is gone, right? That's another one where it just was never great. It was fun and it was great to have a manual in it. It was one of those things where I was just grateful it had it. But that was another one that was tricky to drive because the rev hang was kind of a lot. So anything with rev hang annoys me. But I think the one that did annoy me the most, that was the last Gen Si. It was one of those things. It was okay on a first drive. And in certain instances, it's not bad. But whenever I lived with the Si for a week, with the old Gen Si, it was just I could never be smooth with that thing, and it was just annoying to be always jerking around and just feeling like I'm an idiot that doesn't know how to drive manual. When it's just like the rev hang just made it so artificial feeling as far as how you drove that car. And obviously there's tunes now to fix that, so I would definitely say it's not a deal breaker for any of those vehicles. And even like the GR Supra, the manual Supra and the manual GR Corolla, I don't think that's a deal killer either. If you want an all-wheel drive manual turbo hatch, GR Corolla is basically it anyway. And if that's what you're looking for and you can get one at MSRP, 100%, I would live with the transmission. You could probably play around with the fluid and stuff too to make it a little easier possibly. But I don't like, and I love the GR Supra, the manual Supra. If the GR86 didn't exist and I had to get something other than the Bullet, I'd still probably buy a GR Supra manual. So it's one of those things where it's not a deal breaker by any means, but those were some of the ones that I, in my experience, weren't the best. Two says he's out. Have a good weekend. Thanks for joining in, and hope you have a good weekend as well. We have another about 40 minutes or so here we can go on this live stream. But Carlos says, in my opinion, the Subaru STI had an overly heavy clutch for no reason. My Speed 3 had a stage 1 clutch that was way lighter and easier to modulate. Yeah, that's the clutches are another thing, and it also makes some transmissions harder. And like that's one thing I don't know why Ford with the Mustangs have that clutch spring that's so iffy. I know there's other people who swap the clutch spring. I've never done it in mine. I did in my EcoBoost, but it kind of felt a little weird, the EcoBoost with the different clutch spring, but just the clutches in the Mustangs is really tricky. It's one of the hardest manuals to drive smoothly just because of the clutch. I mean, I'm fine with it. And again, I've happily owned 4 Mustangs that are manual at this point, and I plan to keep the Bullet forever. So it's again not a deal breaker for me, but yeah, the clutch in the Mustang is one of the worst, from an ease of use standpoint. And STIs, I don't remember the STI being terrible myself, but it's been several years since I drove one. And I think over the years they did get better with that too. But yeah, WRX clutch was fine, I think. That one had a little rev hang, I think, but I don't think it was really too bad. So I think they did a pretty good job with that part of the new WRX for sure. So John says, Matt, when are they coming out with a high performance Sentra? I don't know if they're ever coming out with one of those. I wish they would, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that, unfortunately. I think Nissan's just trying to survive with mainstream stuff and, doing the best they can there and really trying to focus on Infiniti. I think that I don't know if the Sentra is going to get any kind of sporty version, unfortunately. Marcus said they did have the Sentra Nismo at some point. Yes, they did. Back then, even though I don't think it was really one of the best ones in its segment, but it still would have been fun to see them offered for the new generation here. It's just they really don't have the parts anymore either. They have like the manual and the Versa, but I don't think that would be able to handle the power of a faster Sentra Nismo. And I don't think they could use a rear engine or rear wheel drive kind of transmission like you get in the 370Z and the Z now. I don't think that would work in something like that. So I think they're just it would just be too much R&D money for them to do anything with a manual for sure. They could do a CVT thing and just drop the VC turbo motor with the CVT and throw that in the Sentra maybe if it fits. But I don't know, maybe if there'd be some appeal for someone who wants an automatic SI if they don't want to go up to an Integra, you could maybe have a Sentra Nismo with the VC turbo and a CVT. We'll see if they ever do that someday, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that either. Tom, thank you so much for the super chat here. He says, hey Matt, how did you learn to drive stick? I learned because of my older brother and my friend. So the first cars I drove stick on was my 2016 Mustang GT and FRS. That's awesome. Especially the 2016 Mustang, that would have been a tough one to learn on. So hats off to you for going for that and sticking with it after that. FRS definitely was a little easier for sure. I learned to drive stick on an old work truck. It was a 1988 Mazda B2000, I think they called them. And that thing had been to hell and back. It was so beat up. So that was really the first thing where I was like 16 working at a car dealership, and that was like one of the old work trucks they had laying around. And so it was like, well, I got to go, because the detail shop that I worked at was like maybe 3/4 of a mile down the road from the actual dealership. So we had to go back and forth a lot. So that was one of the vehicles. So it's like, well, if I need to go up to the dealership, I got to hop in the Mazda and learn to drive it. And I wanted to drive the manual anyway, so I was excited to do that. So that was one of the first ones I learned to drive stick on. And then we also at the dealership, they had a Dodge Dakota V8 single cab manual. And so that was another one that I learned on. And that thing, the clutch had been so worn out. I don't know how it was still running, but it was basically like you could not use the clutch and it would shift fine. So like it was one of these ones where I could like kind of screw up and still be okay. And it kind of gave me a little more leniency as far as how to drive manual, and that kind of was another one to learn on a little bit there. And then from there it was basically driving all the other manual vehicles we had there. So anything from Audi, Porsche, or BMW that was a manual from 2007 to 2011 are the things that I learned to drive manual transmission on. So that included 911s, 997 911s, Boxsters, Caymans, the M3s, E90 M3s, that kind of stuff are some of the other ones that I kind of cut my teeth on, so to speak. But thankfully by that point I'd been pretty good already at learning manuals. So for that point, it was just kind of learning how to drive other manuals smoothly and stuff. But then really, I didn't master it 100% until my first manual car. I think you really have to like own a manual car and live with it to really get good. Manual driving is one of those things you're never going to be good at unless you do it every day, I think. And so, that was my thing, is once I finally bought my first manual transmission car, my buddy was like, look, like this does not have a hill holder clutch. You're going to roll back on a hill and cause a scene if you don't know how to start on a hill. So like the day I bought my brand new Legacy, well, not brand new, but new to me, 15,000 mile, 1-year-old Legacy GT Spec B, took it to a nearby hill with that was on private property, so there wasn't anyone around. And my buddy's like, "All right, you gotta like learn how to not roll back on a hill. Go for it." It was painful because I definitely put that clutch through a hard time for 30 minutes or so there, trying to really nail starting on a hill. But then I got the hang of it, and that was it. So those are all my experiences of driving a manual there. But thanks for the super chat, Tom, and a fun question. Marco says mine was my dream car, a 1996 Eclipse, but didn't really master it until I had a Camaro. Nice. That's 96 Eclipse. Those are so awesome. I think it's a car that's going to eventually appreciate, because I think it's just the Fast and Furious era Eclipses. They're so cool. I love the styling on those things. They were so awesome when they first came out. I always love those Eclipses. Carlos says, I learned from watching your videos on the BRZ. I learned in a V6 Mazda 6. That's awesome. And I'm so glad that BRZ video helped you out. That's still like, it's really one of my top videos from a view standpoint. And it's helped so many people, and I'm so glad that it has. Some people have asked me for a follow-up video, but really, I think everything in that video, even way back then, it's the same stuff I'd say today for anyone that's looking for tips on how to drive a manual. I think I really did a good job in that video, so I just kind of left that. But that's something I could revisit someday, just for kicks, and do another video for fun. Double Strike says, I have failed you all as a performance car driver since I only ever drove one car stick. Well, still more than some people. Some people have never driven even one. So, it's all good. And again, it comes down to personal preferences. Some people don't like manuals for whatever reasons, and that's totally fine too. Raphael says, this takes me back. I learned to drive manual when I was 13 in a Ford Escort EXP, and of all my cars, only 2 have been automatic. Yeah, that's awesome. Ford Escort, those are fun little cars. My dad, one of his first cars was an '84 Ford Escort 2-door little liftback, and he loved that thing. Truck and Car Guy said, learn to drive stick in a beater Hyundai Accent. That's another good one where you don't have to feel bad about it, right? It's just something that's already beat up, and you get your experience and you move on to the nice stuff. Spike Money says, I learned on a 2015 Honda Accord. I was spoiled. Very nice. The Accords, though, that's another one that had the rev hang, and hopefully it didn't screw you up too much, but I just wish that was another one. I love those Accords with the manual, but the rev hang in that just was not great. And I'm hoping, with the tune and stuff, they got better. But Truck and Car Guy says, I still own a manual car now. And yeah, same here. And every car, I mean, technically Beth's cars, we have bought as together. So those have been automatics. But as far as every personal car that I've personally bought, every single one has been a manual still. And I'm hoping to keep that trend up, if I ever buy more cars. But we'll have to see, because a lot of the cars that I am like having as dream cars are automatics these days. So we'll have to see when the trend ends, if it ever does. But still love the Bullet. And let me see. So Carlos says, my dad taught manual to me, and now I'm the one teaching him the advanced techniques of manuals. Well, that's awesome. It's kind of it all comes full circle, I guess. And so that's great. Marco says, man, I wish my car was a manual, but at least the trans is durable. So it would have been fun ringing out this 5-cylinder though. Yeah, definitely would have been cool. But yeah, automatics, again, depends on your commute and preferences and all that. It's not for everyone, but manuals are a lot of fun. Tom says, ever since learning stick, I have been trying to teach anyone willing to learn. I taught 2 people so far and currently teaching my baby sister. That's awesome. It's great that people have any interest in even learning, because a lot of people don't these days. So it's great that people are you're able to teach people there. And yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I don't think I've ever really taught anyone. I know my brother-in-law kind of wanted to learn, but I didn't want to have him do it in the Bullet. And it's just like getting my hands on a manual vehicle that I didn't feel bad beating up on. Because even the press cars, like I don't want to like torch the clutch in a press car either, So it's just, now I've never had a chance to have a vehicle that I didn't feel bad about, teaching someone to drive manual on. Yeah, so. And Marco's asking, do they come with a sequential manual? I don't remember. I'm not exactly sure. You said a 5-cylinder, but I'm not sure what you're talking about car-wise there. Larry, though, says, I have a 2005 MR2 Spider with a 6-speed. Oh, okay, that's sequential manual. Okay, that's what you're talking about. Gotcha. Only 40,000 miles. My wife wants me to sell it for a standard 5-speed manual MR2. I kind of want to keep the SMT for the uniqueness and low miles. Opinion. Interesting. So yeah, I remember hearing about those sequential manuals and those. Really cool idea back then. I've never driven one, so I don't have any clue as far as what the driving experience is like. But if you like it, I would say keep it because that's definitely got to be more rare, and that's a quirky, cool thing that I could see fetching big money someday at Barrett Jackson or Bring a Trailer or something like that. Even though it is objectively probably worse, I'm guessing from a driving standpoint. Um, that's really cool though. That's got to be a very rare car. So if you do sell it, make sure you, yeah, put it on Bring a Trailer or some kind of collector site and get top dollar for that thing if you do get rid of it. But I drove the manual MR2. I have a buddy that has a manual MR2 Spider, and it's a fun little car. I just feel like the Miatas have always been a little more fun, but the mid-engine thing is so unique, and I just feel like the MR2 Spiders always needed more power. I think they had a factory supercharger kit that probably would have made that car perfect. I'd love to try a modded MR2, but I've only driven a stock one, and that just left me wanting for more power. But Linda says, growing up in the 1960s, most folks drove manuals. My parents had cars with 3 on a tree. My mom taught me. My Mustangs were 4 on the floor. At 74 and a bit gimpy, I appreciate automatic cars. But yeah, again, I totally can understand that. And but yeah, it would have been so fun to learn on that and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And yeah, I drove a 3 on a tree once. So I don't know if you ever saw my Ford Ranchero review. I did a 1957 Ford Ranchero review. It was kind of a fun thing I did with Shell back, I think 2018. And first time driving a 3 on the tree. And that was really fun, but it was actually not hard once you get the hang of it. And I really enjoyed it. It was so cool. Yeah, I'd love to drive more classics like that. Spy Harpy says, I was driving in town once and saw a sequential manual saw a manual driving school. The driver was learning, and I gave him a thumbs up as I drove by him. That's awesome. Yeah, Mini actually has a manual driving school. So if anyone does need access to a manual vehicle and you can't get access to one, I think Mini still does have a manual driving school. Honda had one for a little bit as well, but I don't know if they still do. But yeah, Mini I think still has theirs. Obviously, it would probably require a flight to wherever that is at. But if you really want to learn and have a professional show you how, that's going to be probably the best way to do it. It's cool though. There's some others out there. I think I was talking to some other journalist on a drive event. I'm not sure who it was because it's not someone I knew very well. But they said that they actually teach manual driving on the side as like a professional thing. But I don't remember who it was. I wish I could remember. But there are some people out there that do that. So, and so Spy Harpy says that was in San Jose for their thing. So, yeah, hopefully there'll be more of those out there. But it's a dying art. It's something people are less and less appreciative of these days. Abu Nova says in England, manuals are still the default, even on Econoboxes. That's awesome. That's one thing I love about England and Europe in general is all the manual love over there. And it's even a different class of license, I think, in Europe, if I remember correctly, which is also awesome because then it's like, yes, this person not only can like pilot a vehicle safely and responsibly, but they actually like know a little bit more about cars as far as driving a manual and just kind of the engagement. And it's harder to be a distracted driver in a manual because you got to typically have your right hand free to shift gear. So you're on your phone less, you're paying attention more, you're needing to focus on what gear you need to be in. It's just inherently more driver attention there. And so I just think it'd make the whole world a better place if everyone was driving manuals just from a attention standpoint. But again, I know there's limitations with various things that whether it's traffic or age or injuries or whatever the case might be, where it makes more sense for the automatic. And there's a lot of awesome automatics out there too. Thankfully, the automatic isn't the penalty box transmission it used to be back in the day. And Marco says, do you work on your own cars? Considering how busy you are, it'd be tough to stay on top of all your cars. Yeah, I mean, thankfully, the Mach-E doesn't require any maintenance. And the Bullet, since I drive it so little, that hardly requires any maintenance either. But I don't work on my own cars. It's for me, anytime in the past, I've, put some mods on vehicles. I did an oil change on my Mustang EcoBoost a while back once. It was a Shell video or Pennzoil that it was a sponsored thing. So I did change my oil once. You can go watch my oil change ordeal in the EcoBoost if you're curious. It's called like how to change your oil or something on the channel if you want to watch it. But it's just every single time I work on a car, it always ends up taking like 3 times longer than it's supposed to for even the stupidest, simplest stuff. And so it's just one of those things that like I go into it being like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be cool. I'm excited about it. And then it just turns into pain every single time. And it's just, I know this is like going to be insane for some people to hear, but I don't enjoy working on cars because it always just turns into a hassle. I'm not into challenges. I like things to be easy. So if something isn't easy, it doesn't go smoothly, like I get discouraged real easily, and I'm just like, it's just not for me. So I don't actually work on my own vehicles. But thankfully I have a really good mechanic friend who does the oil changes in the Bullet for me, and that's basically all it needs. And then I take them to the dealer if they need anything more extensive. But the Bullet only has not even 19,000 miles, so it's still original brakes, still original everything in the Bullet, even the original air filter, which that I can do myself. So I will swap the air filter on the Bullet eventually. I believe it's 30,000 miles is when that needs to be swapped out because it's an open air filter there. But haven't even needed to do that yet. So yeah, don't work on my own cars. But Tom, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, my friend wants a last gen WRX STI, but they're going for 40 grand with high miles. I'm trying to convince my friend a new stick WRX would be better since I've seen some at MSRP. What are your thoughts? Yeah, so the thing with the STI is the appeal of one, having more power, having the adjustable center diff. There's some exclusive things that are the STIs, but they also are not very reliable. Unfortunately, they get terrible fuel economy, and it's just hard for me to recommend the STI whenever you have modern stuff for close to that money that I think is better if you don't need all-wheel drive. Personally, I'd rather have a Civic Type R. Even a last-gen Civic Type R is, I think, just as much fun and actually better in some ways than the last-gen WRX STI. And now you have stuff like Golf R's for 45, something like that. I'd rather have a brand new Golf R manual over WRX STI. And GR Corolla. Again, I know they're impossible to get, but hypothetically, in some world where they're not super hard to get, that's another one. 45 or whatever for that. I'd rather have over an STI. Now, as far as your argument there about the stick regular WRX. I mean, I think personally, I would rather have a new WRX than the last gen STI as well myself. But the thing is, it's still going to get bad fuel economy and stuff. But at least, yes, you will have a low mileage vehicle or a brand new vehicle, for less money. And yes, you lose out on 30 horsepower or whatever, 40 maybe tops, but it's not a huge difference. And you can mod the WRX, to get more power out of it if you want STI power levels pretty easily. So yeah, I would agree with you and go with a new WRX versus an STI that's used, especially with high miles. At high mileage STI, you are asking for trouble, and it's going to be a money pit sooner or later. So I would definitely go with as new of a WRX as you can possibly get if you're going to go with a boxer engine. So Raphael says, even though I have a Camry now, wish the TRD was a manual. Both my motorcycles are manuals, so it still counts. So there you go. That's awesome. Yeah, it would be cool if they did a manual Camry. Maybe someday they'll do something like that because Toyota's crazy enough. Maybe that's something they will try and go for. Who knows? Marco says, yeah, I know what you mean. That's why I tend to have my mechanic do everything for me. At times, I feel like a disappointment for not knowing anything about beyond the basics. Yep. Well, you're in the same camp as me of disappointing enthusiasts that don't work on their own cars. So it's all good. Don't feel bad about it. I think this goes back to, enthusiasts can take all different forms as far as, the types of vehicles we like, the type of performance we appreciate, whether it's handling, acceleration, a mix of both, or people that hypermile and people that enjoy making a game out of getting the highest fuel economy possible. That is an enthusiast as well, in my own opinion. And, whether you're someone who is built, not bought, and you've built your own car and you've never visited a dealership in your life, more power to you. That's awesome. And I have a ton of respect for people that can do that. But if you're someone who, goes to the dealer and has them handle everything and you just enjoy driving and owning cars or collecting cars, whatever the case is, still just as much of an enthusiast in my opinion. And we all can enjoy cars in different unique ways. And that's kind of what makes the car scene fun, is the diversity of it, I think. Double Strike Photo says, after an 8-hour day changing Brembo brakes, I said, screw it. Next time I'm going to let someone else do it. Whew, yeah, that sounds brutal. Yeah, that takes some dedication. I would never try swapping the brakes, and especially brakes are one of those things where I'm especially like nervous about, because like if you screw up brakes, like you could really like end up in a bad place versus something else. You might not be the end of the world, but brakes are something you definitely don't want to mess around with. Thankfully, they're kind of, they're not foolproof, but it's not hard to be good at changing brakes and stuff like that. But it's it's certainly something you got to make sure that you have done it well and done it right, so that it doesn't go badly. Smile from Al says, "Hey Matt, hope you're doing well. I'm surprised that the automatic transmission in the CX-90 is developed in house. It's brave they went that way instead of using the ZF 8-speed." Yeah, it is. The whole CX-90 is kind of a conundrum that I can't reckon in my head as far as how they, were able to do that vehicle, how they're able to justify the cost, how they're able to justify the fuel economy, all these things. It's kind of crazy how they justified the transmission, all this stuff. It's like, I don't know where they got the money from, but I'm so glad they did it, because it's really cool. Now, I'm hoping to spend a week with the CX-90. They're scheduled me in one here next month, I think. So I'll be able to spend a week with one and really get a better feel for that transmission and see, because it was in that Bay Area traffic in San Francisco there, it was not great towards the end of the day there, inching up. And it did feel kind of like a manual transmission, which is not something that an automatic buyer is going to want to, feel. So I hope that I have a better experience when I have one for a week. But yeah, it's impressive. I am very surprised they did that, and I wish them all the best with it. Again, I know the Mazda engineer, he's a brilliant person. They are very good with, what they do. And like we said earlier, they've nailed the direct injection tuning and stuff. So I think, if anyone can work that out, it's them. And maybe with a little bit of software tweaking, they can maybe, smooth out some of the rough edges on that transmission a little bit to make it better, whether it's as a, refresh or some type of software thing, potentially, I don't know. But I'm hopeful that it will turn out to be pretty, good for them in the long term. But Carlos, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, "Here's a parting Mother's Day gift for you and Beth before I leave. Got to go get my mom's Mother's Day gift while she's off shopping." Well, I totally understand that. Thanks so much for joining in here, Carlos. And thank you so much for the super chat as well. It's very, very kind of you. I hope your mom has a great Mother's Day as well. So Goth Rocker says, "Speaking of Enthusiast, in my opinion, Nissan messed up with the pricing of the new Z. How do you not offer a limited slip diff in the base model? The BRZ and the 86 have it as standard. Makes no sense." I agree. It makes no sense. I hope, I don't know, but I hope that they are just price gouging the diehards that are all going to buy the loaded version anyway to start off with. And all the diehard tuners don't care because they can just swap one in. So I think, I'm guessing if it were me playing it and I had to justify how they're doing it currently, I would say that they're, grabbing all the cash they can, and then they are going to keep adding in new stuff for the Z potentially. And I'm envisioning after everyone that's going to buy one, no matter what, buys theirs, and after all the first tuners get their hands on them and, do their content for YouTube or whatever, and then move on, I'm thinking that there will be eventually some type of, sport package on the base one that gives you the limited slip diff. And even just that, just put in a limited slip diff and that's it. But yeah, I've had so many conversations with other journalists about this as well, where it's like, an LSD is not expensive. It's not, but just a bummer that they're forcing people to go to the aftermarket for that if you don't want to spend 50 grand for the, higher performing, version of the Z. It's just so bizarre. But I think it's really this, they probably figured they didn't need to do it in the first year or two because they're going to be sold out anyway. They don't need to worry about pleasing and making sense. Honestly, they don't need to please the customer with a logical offering. They can just, offer the goofy stuff and people snap it up because that's all that they have to pick from. And then, once you actually need to sell the Z and you need to convince people, then that's when you bring in the compelling stuff, I guess, and with this kind of market, I can't blame them, I guess, for that. But I'm guessing that's why they're doing that. But yeah, otherwise it could be a great competitor and a great alternative to the BRZ and the 86 if they actually did the cheap one with the limited slip diff. But Marco says this Nissan being Nissan, yeah, a lot of the stuff they do sometimes doesn't make sense. And so yeah, interesting stuff. Now Raphael says, "I could work on it, but my Toyota dealer is almost as good as Lexus. I bring in the car, they walk me to a comfy chair and even bring me a coffee." Yeah, dealers, at least in my area, are really good with that too, where they're all, pretty good with the service, at least from a, having loaners, for example, having a nice experience in the dealer showroom and all that. And so I'm glad that, it's something that I think most dealers have figured out that's important, to people, and they do that a little bit better than they used to. Golf Rocker says everyone should watch Matt's Mazda CX-90 review. Very impressive. If I ever give in and decide to buy an SUV, it will probably be a Mazda. I'd rather see an all-wheel drive inline six Mazda 6. Me too, and so does Mazda. I mean, that's the other thing. Whenever I was having lunch with these Mazda executives and engineers, they're like, tell people to buy sedans. We'd love to do it, but no one will buy it. So that's right now their problem is they cannot justify it from a market demand standpoint. And so you'll see the CX-70 is going to be the next thing to come up, and that'll probably just be a shorter CX-90. Basically the CX-60 you see over in Europe, I'm assuming. I haven't seen it, I don't know anything, but that just would be my guess. But then it's just, if they start to see a change in trend where they think they can justify a new Mazda 6, then that's something you'll see. So it's just a matter of them having a compelling reason to do it, unfortunately. But I mean, hey, look, they did none of the other stuff makes sense. So I didn't really push them because I'm just happy to be talking to these folks. But I don't know how they justified all the stuff they justified the Mazda CX-90 either. So I guess they just really wanted to go for the premium thing. So I think that a lot of the stuff they justify in the pursuit of the premium thing. That's why there's a turbo Mazda 3, not because they want to try and chase Mazda speed dreams or anything or appease enthusiasts. It's because they want to have it compete better with Audi A3. That's basically the only reason why there's a turbo Mazda 3. So the same reason CX-90, they wanted to compete with an X5. You got to compete with the X5 by offering X5 stuff. So they did all the X5 stuff, and now it's a Japanese X5 essentially. And so they're hoping to, increase the appeal. So maybe if they want to have the Mazda 6 be a BMW 340i, then, maybe that could justify it. But it's just, I guess they're seeing that, again, there's just not enough demand in that segment, unfortunately. And Diego says, what are some of your favorite plug-in hybrids? I hear a lot of them aren't great to drive in electric mode. In the past, that was definitely a compromise. Like, for example, the Volvo plug-in hybrids previously, the old ones, where like, if there was a gentle breeze on a flat road, it would like, all right, got to kick on the gas engine because this is too much, but now they've gotten a lot more powerful to the point that, even Volvo improved their motors here in this past model year here. As far as favorite plug-in hybrids, I gotta say the Toyota does the best ones, in my opinion. The Prime stuff is just, I love it. I love the RAV4 Prime. I still think the RAV4 Prime is like the perfect car for the average American, that would solve so much of the climate stuff like overnight if Toyota could build enough RAV4 Primes and people actually would go for it. But I mean, the RAV4 is the most popular vehicle outside of an F-150. You have the very successful body style that everyone loves. You have a fantastic powertrain with a plug-in hybrid, enough electric range to do most people's commutes, 42 miles of electric range. It's basically perfect. And so, yeah, I love the RAV4 Prime. That was actually a consideration for us before we decided we wanted to go fully electric with the Mach-E. If we hadn't done that, RAV4 Prime would have probably been one of my top picks as far as what we would have personally bought because I love them that much. I also really love the Prius Prime already, just from my first driving it. I'm hoping to get one later this summer for a week. But I love it. It's, you have, 220 some horsepower in, a sleek looking little Prius that's powerful. It's fast. It's fun. I love it. And the crazy part of me wants to kind of do a Prius Prime build and like make my own GR version and just soup up a Prius Prime because it's actually like a super cool little vehicle in my opinion. So those are my favorite plug-in hybrids. So the Hyundai stuff's not bad either. Like a Tucson plug-in hybrid's still pretty solid. I like it a lot too. And I'm trying to think of some other plug-in hybrids I've experienced. I don't know. I just think, Toyota is some of the best with hybrid stuff. So, just to me, their plug-in hybrids really can't be beat currently. Two Track Jack says, I wish Mazda would make a minivan. They tried kind of with the Mazda 5 and they had the Mazda, what was it called? Their minivan back then. They did have one a long time ago. Was it the MPV in the States? I know the MPV was something else in Europe, but I think they call it the MPV here in the States for the minivan. They made one. Even the Mazda 5, at one point you could get the Mazda 5, which had sliding rear doors and had 3 rows of seats in a manual. Another slept-on car that I think someday could go for enormous amounts of money with the Radwood crowd. But yeah, so they tried and they did a pretty awesome thing with it, honestly. And then, just didn't get enough sales and went away, unfortunately. Linda says, I have a recall notice on the rear backup camera on my Mustang, but it's working perfectly. So thoughts on taking it in? I sort of feel like it's a waste of time. I'm not sure if it's the same recall I have, but the Bullet also has an open recall currently for, I think they said that's the rear sensors can sometimes interfere with the blind spot monitoring and the rear camera. If that's the same one you're talking about, it's been out, I think, for about a year, that recall. I haven't taken the Bullet in for it either because my stuff's been working fine. And I am very nervous about taking my car to dealers, especially the Bullet, um, just because I just see so many Joyride videos. Not like the Bullet's the hottest thing out there, but I've had bad experiences in the past with Ford dealers in my area. So I think so. I talked to my mechanic friend and he gave me a referral to a good Ford mechanic that works at a Ford dealer that I can request and have them do the recall. So I'm going to hopefully do the recall on the Bullet soon. I think it is a safety thing, so I probably would say it's probably a good idea to do at some point just to be on the safe side. But again, if your stuff's working fine, I can understand not being in a hurry to do it, but I'm sure it's something you're going to want to do, at some point there. And Car Stick Wood said, I wish they made big body on frame SUVs with sliding rear doors. Yep, it's just I think the sliding rear doors make it uncool, but maybe like Hyundai or someone bold like that will try it someday and make it cool again. We'll have to see. And David says, after 18 months, I'm still slinging the BRZ around the autocross courses. Thanks again for being part of that decision. Well, I'm glad that it helped you with the video there, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying it 18 months later. That's awesome. I'm so glad you're loving it. And yes, I'm also a little bit jealous as well because it's going to be so much fun, I'm sure. I really miss my BRZ, and I'd love to have the new one someday. Um, and Diego says, I've been thinking about the new Prius Prime 2. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't seen the video on the Prius Prime, definitely check it out. I really liked it, and I'm excited to spend a week with one, and I'll have more thoughts there. But yeah, I really like it. If I if I needed a sedan and I wanted a good fuel economy as a family little vehicle or something, I would totally own a Prius Prime. There's a lot of other stuff. There's so many good sedans that would be tough, but if I really wanted a good fuel economy, Prius Prime would 100% be the choice. And Hugo, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hey, Matt, just tuned in. I'm currently working, but did you hear about the Ram Rampage? Any thoughts? I think it's going to replace the Dakota. Yeah, I hear rumors about that. And it's been all over the place because I think some of the stuff that's been spied has been spied for like the Mexican market and stuff like that. And then there's talks that it's going to be an electric thing for the first mid-sized, Ram. So I don't know what to believe anymore as far as Ram's mid-sized truck. I think there's something coming, but I don't know. Is it going to be electric? Is it going to be some kind of Maverick competitor that's on some, kind of crossover platform? I have no clue what to expect anymore. It just seems like the stories are always all over the place. So, I mean, it's an easy money printer. I don't know, what they're waiting on, but the sooner they can get something out, the better, regardless of what it is. I even said a while back they should just take the Fiat Toro that they sell in Mexico and stuff. And if that'll pass like American crash standards, slap some, Fiat back. You can even just bring it over as a Fiat and sell that. I mean, Fiat dealers need something new to sell. But if not that, slap some Dodge badges on it, call it the Dodge Turo or something, and sell that. I don't know. I don't know why they're taking their time with a smaller truck here. Yeah, thanks so much for the super chat there, Hugo, and thanks for joining in even though you're working there. I totally understand. Sometimes these live streams don't work for everyone from a time standpoint. So Raphael says, I would be so much more likely to get a plug-in hybrid over full electric. I wish that was the direction the industry had pushed towards. Yeah, and I think there still is a good push towards that. And I think there's more investment in there, like Volvo investing in a better plug-in hybrid version with all their, current gas-powered stuff. I think Matt Farah also did a really convincing argument about plug-in hybrids and how, he thinks that's really the right way for Americans right now to go. Because, there's a lot of people that do have much farther drives than people in Europe. And, we have obviously a much larger country. So, having that extra range and the extra flexibility, certainly there's some merit there. I think, most people, if they're realistic, they probably don't need, to have tons and tons of range, but I get, the mental, hurdle there. And I also understand that, not everyone wants to rent a car when they're doing a road trip or something like that. But, it's, I think though, I do agree that I think Toyota has the right idea. I know it's been a non-popular idea among the car industry of the way Toyota's been doing it with having, you know, the slower electric ramp up. But like they said during the presentation about the Prius Prime, they're like, we can build like 7 Prius Primes or one, you know, BZ4X. It's like, you know, and if you're only realistically, again, going back to what people actually do, and people actually do less than 50 miles of driving a day for what people actually need, it's one of those things where you're trying to tell people what they need, not what they want. And Americans just aren't good at buying what they need. We always have to buy, you know, excess for whatever reason. But, you know, Toyota's like, look, like you're going to still have the same emissions reduction with the Prius Prime and less emissions from the battery production with a Prius Prime versus, you know, BZ4X or something like that. And you're not using the 200-mile range of the BZ4X every day for most people. So you're fine in a Prius Prime, plugging it in every night, having your 40 miles of range or whatever. And that's it. Like it's, you know, but it's tough because again, it's just some things, you know, whether it's because of Tesla making electric vehicles the cool futuristic new thing or what, you know, I mean, they have their advantages. I love the lower operating costs of the Mach-E and, you know, the instant power, not having any kind of transmission, not having any kind of maintenance to worry about. You know, there is definitely, you know, some things like for us, the electric thing was the more appealing option. But you know, I think for most of America, plug-in hybrids are the way to go. I think Toyota has the right idea, even if they're taking some flack for it right now. I think they are incredibly wise with their path. I hope they don't change their path too much with the new leadership because I think they have the more pragmatic approach of like, sure, we can have this pie in the sky dream of having everyone buy an EV by 2025, and that would be great in a lot of ways. But it might not be great in other ways, depending on where you live in the country and how infrastructure investments come in or don't come in, and how politics change or don't change, and you know all these different things. You know that I think Toyota kind of has the safer like let's ride the waves instead of trying to catch the wave like other companies are. You know, I think I don't know. I think yeah, I've always agreed with Toyota having the right approach, and I think that's yeah, plug-in hybrids are a nice stepping stone for most people and a good trial run for an EV, you know, and I think most people when they experience the electric power will really love it and it'll be great and they'll love the extra savings, you know, from a, you know, fuel standpoint and all that. But you know, it's just one of those things that just some people just they can't wrap their head around it. They don't like it for whatever reason. You know, I remember even someone told me that they had a friend who wasn't a car person who bought a Jeep Wrangler 4xe and just bought it because they wanted a Wrangler and that was the only one available on the lot. And they didn't even know it was a plug-in hybrid. And like their friend was like, you know, like it has electric motors, like you can plug it in and not use the engine. Like, oh, really? So, I mean, you know, some people like they said they don't plug it in every night and stuff because it's just like they forget to do it. So it's just, there's still some hurdles with plug-in hybrids, unfortunately, with American consumers. But I think that they're incredibly brilliant and the right solution for most people right now. So I totally agree with you. Goth Rocker says, I saw the new Prius at the dealership. Can't believe I actually like the new Prius and it looks really good. More power plus the all-wheel drive. Toyota nailed it. Yeah, I think they definitely did. And their marketing campaign, if you've seen their commercials, are also hilarious and brilliant too. But anyway, PK, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, heard a new Q5 is coming. Should I wait for the new gen? I mean, Q5 is definitely ready. It's, you know, the time is right, I'd say, for a new Q5 pretty soon. But I haven't really heard much about it yet. So maybe I'm just out of the loop on that one. I don't know. But I haven't seen much about it coming super soon. But I'm guessing that, yeah, there's got to be something coming relatively soon for that. But depends on how much of a hurry you're in, PK, as far as whether, you know, you want to wait it out or not. Yeah, I'd say I don't think there's anything super close on the horizon. So if you can wait a year or two, you know, then maybe wait it out. But otherwise, the current Q5 is great. I had one for a week, really liked it. It's a really nice vehicle. And I don't think you can really go wrong with the current generation either, unless you really, you know, want to have the newest thing out there. But I haven't heard anything currently about it. So sorry, I don't have any better info for you there. But yeah, I do love the Q5. So comfortable, so smooth, really great little, you know, vehicle. And let me see here. So Marco says another slept-on car is the Nissan minivan with the VQ motor. Yeah, that would be cool too. I don't think the Quest had it, right? I could be wrong, but I don't think it did. David says Prius Prime build. Yeah, if I had time to do a project car, that would probably be my version of a project car. It's like something out of the ordinary, like not the usual thing, just doing something a little odd and crazy, but something that I personally just like have a little bit of passion towards. I have no time, no space, no money for a project car, unfortunately. But that'd probably be one of the ones I'd consider doing. Goth Walker, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, Happy Mother's Day, Beth. So kind of you guys. Yeah, we'll make sure that it's a great day for her. And she's very much loved. She's a great mom. And so it's going to be great to celebrate her tomorrow. Let me see. So, yeah, Two-Track Jack's talking about the Nissan having a CVT transmission there. Truck and Car Guy says, I would think Dodge would have gone hybrid before committing fully to EV, but what do I know? Yeah, and I don't think the story is over with Dodge. They're kind of being weird with their stuff. I mean, they're saying they're doing the electric thing because performance made them do it and all that. And I mean, and I agree from that standpoint. If you want the fastest thing possible, electric's the way to go. You always have a perfect launch, immediate power, and it's unbeatable. I mean, and I was talking to one of my friends this past week. He's considering getting a Tesla Model Y Performance, and he's like, I mean, they're so cheap, especially now with the price cuts. He's like, it's 54 grand or something for a Model Y Performance. It does like a 3.5 seconds 0 to 60 or something for 54 grand. Like, I mean, if you want to go and smoke everyone from a red light, get a Model 3 Performance and call it a day. Don't even bother shopping around because nothing's going to beat it unless you spend double the money at least. So it's like an impossibly hard thing to beat right now. And it's just like, so I think as far as Dodge is concerned, yeah, if you want to be the muscle car king from a straight line drag standpoint, what was the biggest problem with the Challengers? Hooking up the tires. They always had tons of wheel spin in the Challengers. How do you fix that? Go all-wheel drive. What's an easy way to do all-wheel drive? Electric, because then you have the instant launch, you have the instant torque, tons of power. You do the power super easy, do 1,000 horsepower. And, it's going to be the drag king as a result, while all the Mustangs are spinning their tires and waiting for their engines to rev up, which is fun. And I love that. And that's why I'm keeping the Bullet, because I'm certainly in the camp that appreciates that. But, they're going to be embarrassed at the racetrack once these Charger EVs come out. I mean, they're going to just leave everything for dead, aside from maybe a Tesla Model S Plaid or something. But, aside from that, it's like you can't beat it. So, I think it's just, I understand that, but I also think, we've been hearing these rumors about the Hurricane 6 motor paired with a plug-in hybrid thing to do, some type of faster Hellcat, like a new Hellcat, with some type of gas-powered muscle car potentially in the future as well. And so, they have done that with the Dodge Hornet, for example. There's the RT version. Dodge Hornet RT is the plug-in hybrid one. That's the performance one, is the plug-in hybrid. So I don't think the gas-powered muscle days are totally over for Dodge, potentially, even though they swear up and down that it is. They've been a little bit iffy about that sometimes. So I don't know. I wouldn't count out Dodge 100% as far as gas-powered stuff goes currently. And Trent Cartwright, thank you so much for the super chat here. He says, here's a little something for you and Beth from Mother's Day. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Totally unnecessary, but I really, really appreciate it. And the support is always something we're very, very thankful for. You guys are so good. You're so awesome. I couldn't be any luckier with the amount of support that I have here on this channel. It really means a lot. And honestly, like the support you guys have shown, whether it's with watching the videos or, the super chats or memberships and all that kind of stuff, it really has helped this channel to stay afloat and keep going, because the ad rates these days are all over the place. The views aren't something I can count on anymore, and so this stuff really, really helps. So I really appreciate it. It means a lot. So we are at the 2-hour mark here. So I didn't even notice we're at 2 hours and 2 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun chatting, and I always have a great time chatting with you guys. So thank you all very much, though. I do have to sign off here and keep on going with the rest of my day here. But thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed the live stream here. I'll be back next week for another one. And stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting week of some reveals and some stuff. I'll have another review here. And for anyone who's a fan of Beth's videos as well, we'll be doing an interior review here this week coming up as well. So stay tuned for that. It'll be an interesting one. For those of you who think that we don't do very many negative videos, stay tuned for the interior review this week coming up. We're brutally honest, and it's just we're always honest in the videos, but that'll be a good example of how we're not always as positive as some people think we are. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend. Once again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And thank you all very much for watching. And thank you all once again for joining, for all the super chats. And Beth also says thanks as well. She's been tuning in here off and on too. So she says thanks as well for all the very kind super chats there. Yeah, thank you once again very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.